everybody. Eileen, could you open up with the opening statement?
Township of Howell Zoning Board of Adjustment, Monday, December 16, 2024, regular meeting. I hereby declare this meeting of the Howell Township Zoning Board to be open, adequate notice having been given pursuant to New Jersey Open Public Meeting Act in the following manner. First, on December 11th, 2023, a copy of said notice was mailed to the Asbury Park Press and the Star Ledger. Second, on December 11th, 2023, a copy of said notice was hand-delivered to the clerk of the Township of Howell. Third, on December 11th, 2023, said notice was posted in the office of the Zoning Board and on the bulletin board in the Howell Township Municipal Building, 4567 Route 9, Howell Township, New Jersey. In accordance with the Fire Prevention Code and for your safety, please be advised that this facility designed with 2 emergency exits at the front and the rear of the meeting room. Furthermore, smoking is not permitted in the municipal building. Please take note that this meeting is being videotaped for possible future broadcast on Howell Township TV 77. This meeting is a judicial proceeding. Any questions or comments must be limited to the issues of what the board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and the decorum appropriate to a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. Thank you.
Thank you. Could we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Barillo is excused. Mr. Cantor.
Here.
Mr. Hughes.
Here.
Mr. Roscoe.
Here.
Mr. Stanton is excused. Mr. Ryan is excused. Ms. Scottson. Here. And Mr. Mertens.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Could I ask everybody to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, the next order of business. Andy, could you swear in our professionals?
Do you swear the testimony you'll give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, to help you God?
I do.
Please state your names for the record.
Charles Cunliffe. Jennifer Beam. Shari Spiro.
Your professionals are sworn, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Andy. The next order of business, approval of minutes. First one will be regular meeting, November 4th, 2024. Eligible voters are Barillo, Cantor, Hughes, Mertens, Orozco, Ryan, Scottson. Could I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Okay, could I have a roll call?
Mr. Cantor.
Yes.
Mr. Hughes.
Yes.
Mr. Roscoe.
Yes.
Ms. Scottson.
Yes.
And Mr. Mertens.
Yes.
Minutes approved.
Okay, the next minutes to be approved is regular meeting, November 25th, 2024. Eligible voters, Barillo, Hughes, Mertens, Ryan, and Scottson. Can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Hughes.
Yes.
Ms. Scottson.
Yes.
And Mr. Mertens.
Yes.
Minutes approved.
Okay, any vouchers?
No vouchers tonight.
Okay, correspondence.
I have one thing for correspondence, then Mr. Pape has one thing to say. But case number BA 23-04, Omnicon Realty LLC, will be rescheduled with notice to March 10th, 2025, with an extension granted to the board through April 1st, 2025.
Okay, thank you. They have the extension of time, that's good. Okay, anybody for that case number BA 2304, Omnicon Realty LLC, that is being carried to March 10th, 2025. Expiration is April 1st. Okay, and Mr. Pape, you had...
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Kenneth Pape on behalf of Messrs. Pecker and Braun. They're the third application on your agenda. Our clients advised me that they have elected to withdraw their application without prejudice. They do not intend to go forward with the application, and it can now be removed from the board's agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So anybody here in the public for case number BA 22-11, that case is officially being withdrawn at this time. Okay, do we have anything else? Okay, next is resolutions. First one is case number 23-18, Cranberry Road Holdings LLC. Eligible voters, Barillo, Cantor, Hughes, Mertens, Orozco, and Ryan. Can I have a motion?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Hughes,
Second.
second by Jose. Roll call, please.
Mr. Cantor,
Yes.
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Roscoe,
Yes.
and Mr. Mertens.
Yes.
Resolution approved.
Okay, the next case number, BA 24-07, 1805 US 9 LLC. Eligible voters, Barillo, Cantor, Hughes, Mertens, Orozco, and Ryan. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to pass that.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call.
Mr. Cantor,
Yes.
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Roscoe,
Yes.
Ms. Scottson,
Yes.
and Mr. Mertens.
Yes. And- Okay, go ahead.
Resolution approved.
Okay, one thing is, I believe, Anne Marie, you missed out on the last vote, so officially we need to, okay, okay. Okay, the first application before the board tonight is case number BA 20-118, Fort Plains Partners LLC. Type, use and bulk variance to construct one flex warehouse and one self-storage building. The description is application of Fort Plains Partners LLC as applicants and Fort Plains Partners LLC, Lot 6.01 and 1499 Holding Company, LLC, Lot 15.03 and 15.04, warehouse and mezzanine office space, and one 4-story self-storage building and stormwater management system on premise known as Block 137, Lot 6.01 and 15.03 and 15.04 Fort Plains Road. This is a bifurcated application, as the applicant is only seeking a use variance approval at this time. This application was partially heard on August 26, 2024, when it was carried to September 9, 2024, with no further notice. The application was previously heard on September 9, 2024, when it was carried to October 28, 2024. Eligible voters are Barillo, Cantor, Hughes, Mertens, Ryan, Orozco, and Scottson. Expiration is December 31st, 2024.
Good, Chairman, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
My name is Ron Gazarowski. I'm an attorney. I represent TFE Properties, and I'm appearing on behalf of my client as an objector's attorney in this case.
Okay.
I have a comment to make, or rather perhaps in the form of a motion. I've read the transcripts. It's my position that I recognize that the applicant has a right to bifurcate his case, whereas he hears first the use variance, which is why we're here this evening, that at a later point in time, there's a site plan hearing. It's my position that this, in fact, is one of those exceptions to that rule, because it is, in fact, a complicated case. There are numerous issues with regard to parking, setbacks, and the like, and I would make my argument to the board that this is a case that should not be bifurcated. The site plan and the use variance should be heard together in one hearing. That's my position.
Okay, Andy, could you chime in on this?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. My suggestion is, and Mr. Gazarowski called me this afternoon to let me know of his position, is that he confirms this position in writing, articulating the cases he's relying on, and then my recommendation is the hearing go forward, and then, I'll make a legal recommendation. I don't know if we're finishing tonight. I tend to not think so, at least not vote. But so I would
Okay, well, I'm going to concur. Everybody on the board would like to.
Just curious, who does he represent?
yeah, Mr. Gazarowski, who's your client? You said TF something,
TF.
and
TF.
TFE Properties, and where are they located vis-à-vis the subject property, if you know.
They own properties in Howell Township.
Understood.
But are they on Ford Plains, or they just hold properties in Howell?
They own properties in
Okay,
Howell Township.
okay.
So I appreciate your comment, and do we want to set up a time schedule for that?
Well, again, let's see how the evening goes.
All right?
I said, let's see how the evening goes. Yeah. I mean,
My understanding is my colleague and my friend is not going to conclude this evening.
right. So I don't know when the board is going to hear this next is my point, though. So I don't, right? If
Yeah.
we don't finish tonight, I'm not sure when it's going to get scheduled.
Yeah, we
Ron.
only have 5 members tonight, and the most important thing is I would like to get testimony on, because we have a lot of backlog with cases coming up.
Right.
And I don't see any reason why we can't at least get the testimony on
I
record.
understand that, and I appreciate it. I know that I'm getting into the game late. I could only have one request. I take one vacation a year. That's from December the 26th until January the 5th. That's the only.
Well, that won't
courtesy
be an
I
issue,
give.
Mr. Gazarovski.
Pardon me?
We don't, our next meeting, the reorganizations meeting's not till after January 5th.
Okay, fine.
So you'll be fine.
All right, thank you for the
And I'll
courtesies.
get back
Okay.
to you.
Thank you for the courtesies of hearing me.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Before Mr. Gazarovski leaves, we had the opportunity to speak beforehand. We do have 4 witnesses that we're presenting this evening, and I'm optimistic that we'll be able to present all 4 witnesses to the board, with the understanding that cross-examination of those witnesses would occur after the 4th witness testifies. I've assured Mr. Gazarovski that if he chose to leave early, that we will be back with our team when you reschedule us, and the cross-examination opportunity will be made available to him at a future meeting. We will not shut down our hearing without that.
Yeah, that's the one advantage of being an old man. Everybody feels sorry for you. Thank you.
Not feeling sorry. I'm not going to tell
Yeah,
you.
no,
what it is.
I do want to get everybody on testify tonight.
And Mr. Chair, I have one further. I personally believe that this application is the poster child of what should be a bifurcated application. But when we present the bifurcated application to you, we continuously are responsive to your board members and your professionals' requests for any supplemental information. You know, we've been working on this application for, believe it or not, 7 years. We've been working with the board for approximately 2. We've had 3 hearings. The number of times that we have met with your staff to update drainage or landscaping or lighting so that the use variance application is meaningful, we've done it many, many times. So if there's an opportunity given by your counselor to Mr. Gazarovski to do a brief on his position, I would welcome the opportunity to do the same. I would like to provide you with what I believe is the applicable law, and I do appreciate that Mr. Bayer has ruled that we can proceed this evening.
Yes.
So
Okay.
all that is the preamble.
Now, do you have any new professionals testifying tonight that we haven't sworn in?
Christine Caffone, I believe, was here when you swore in some time ago, but for safe, if you would like, I know that Nick Federici was, I know that Louis Ugner was.
Yeah, I know he was, yeah, because, I mean, we can wait till she comes up to
Okay.
testify, and we'll do it then.
Okay.
Okay, so we can move along.
This is not a summation. A summation isn't going to happen until all the witnesses have testified and all the examination has been placed before the board. But by way of just a little summary of where we are, this is our 3rd hearing before the board. We are asking the board for a use variance to permit 2 uses on the property. A self-storage building, which actually is a permitted use, but it's not permitted if it's on a property with another use. And then the flex building, which in itself is a use variance. So we're asking for this board to consider variance relief for those 2 uses. We have, we initially presented the plan to the board. The board and the board professionals in August had a number of comments. We made certain revisions to the plans. At the September meeting, there were considerable comments about the size of the modules, the number of doors, and there was a significant request from the board to redesign the site so that both uses functioned independently, so that the traffic associated with self-storage and the traffic associated with the flex building were separated from each other. And we've done that. Before we came before the board, our clients did two things that were fairly extraordinary. One, they directed that the design of their project would have no access to Fort Plains Road. Fort Plains Road, we have hundreds of feet of access, and there's no restriction, and there's no sight distance issues. But they have told us, and we have incorporated into the plan, complete closure of Fort Plains Road. Not only is there no access, there is a fireman's access. Chief Proc asked that we have one emergency access, but no general access, and the entire perimeter is bermed and landscaped. That was a fairly extraordinary offer. The second thing is our clients negotiated and successfully purchased from the owners of the KFC properties a right-of-way so that they could build a road from their property out to Route 9. These were two, I think, extraordinary things that were done early on before we came before the board. And by way of summary, that's where we are. We've made the revisions that were requested at the September meeting. We carry forward all the commitments that we've made to date. And with your permission, Mr. Chair, Mr. Zugner is ready to begin. His presentation will be the physical changes to the site that were done in response to comments from the board and professionals. It'll be that his testimony will be followed by our architect's testimony, who will testify to the changes that he made to the buildings. And then the next fact witness is Nick Federici, who is our traffic expert, who will review with the board the revised circulation. And optimistically, Mr. Chair, we'll get to Christine Cafone and have all four witnesses testify this evening.
Okay, good. That's good to hear.
Ready to begin?
Yes, let's go.
Thank you. Mr. Zugner, I remind you that you're under oath, and I remind the board that his qualifications have been made part of the record as a professional engineer. If you could let the board IT officer know what exhibits you'd like to use for your testimony, and then I'm going to ask in a narrative to identify the revisions that you've made to your plans.
Sure. If I could, I believe it's Exhibit A29. It's a revised color rendering. That's it. Wonderful. So this is an exhibit. It's labeled Site Rendering. It's an updated version of what we've been working with at prior hearings. It's a colored version of the site plan for clarity. And what I had thought maybe I would do is talk about what's changed, and then we could go to a sort of what hasn't changed. So some of the key revisions in this plan, and one of the big elements that was requested of us, was to separate out the uses. And if you recall, the two buildings to the left, those are the flex space buildings. The building to the right on this plan, towards Route 9. Route 9 is going up and down along the right-hand edge of this plan. That's the self-storage building. We've talked about those before. The buildings themselves, in terms of footprint, and there'll be discussion on what's changed in them, but that location, buildings are in the same spot, and the extents are the same. We've created a separation between them, and you can see in a darker green there, there's a stormwater basin. There had always been a stormwater basin in that location. We shifted it a little bit in order to create two separate access pieces, one around the self-storage building on the right, and then one on the left. Those were linked in the prior plan, and so they're now separated by a stormwater basin, ability to landscape and create a real division there. A little bit hard to see in that darker line below that stormwater basin is a emergency access, similar to what had given us access for the fire chief to Fort Plains Road, would give emergency access between the two sites. It seemed like a logical addition.
Is that going to be gated, and they'll just have a key to get in?
Knox.
Okay.
Knox.
Yeah. On the flex space side to the left, there'll be some discussion on how the building interior was modified. One of the key elements, and is shown in the plan now and was discussed previously, was that each unit would have simply one loading door per unit. And that's identified, probably hard to see clearly here in this edition of the plan, but it is in the revised plans. Also in this, if you recall, there was some discussion on how potential contractors in the units would use the yard and where they would have equipment, say a landscape contractor. In a prior edition, there was a bigger turnaround area above and towards Route 9 of those buildings. And we modified that space to show both vehicle-sized spaces and oversized spaces. And I know it was a condition that was discussed, and I believe, I'm sure would continue, there'd be no outdoor storage. But the board members had wanted clearly to have some defined and designated spaces. Say if a contractor had a truck and trailer, or say a plumber had a fleet of 3 pickup trucks, there was space to park those. And so we've created that.
Okay.
On the self-storage building, it's very much a similar loop around the building. It's still one way. On this plan would be below it at the back of the building. That one-way loop continues around. We've created additional vehicle parking space around that loop. So while we met parking before, that was as one overall site. So now with 2 separate sites, and I'll go through the numbers in a moment, but we had worked to make sure each individual parcel had the appropriate and requisite number of parking spaces for vehicles, and each does. In a prior plan, if you look at the flex space building where it sort of has an angled side to it, middle of the property just above it, there had been vehicle spaces there. They were eliminated. There's shown now a offloading area for a truck or a trailer. Those vehicle spaces, though, have been more than made up for with the addition on each side, the reconfiguration. Again, probably easier just to describe here. This was talked about previously. At each entrance to Route 9, there would be a proposed monument sign identifying each individual use and that use alone. So there would be 2 monument signs along Route 9, and they would not be campus-wide, they'd be for the individual uses. And lastly, as an element that's changed here, there was discussion on fencing, and we had added previously a fence towards Fort Plains along the back of our parking lot as a extra barrier beyond the buffer line. And it had ended, if you recall, where we had the emergency access. Well, we've revised that so it continues past the emergency access gate and then actually runs up on the plan to a point where it would hit a retaining wall so that whole parcel is fully encapsulated. It was a good comment by one of the board members that it had ended too early, and we've revised that.
What type of fence is that?
That would be a vinyl privacy fence.
Okay.
You said vinyl and 6 foot high?
Correct, 6
That's
foot.
what we had said, yes.
So a couple of key elements that maybe I would say remain the same in terms of what we've seen and talked about before. We've talked, I think, a fair amount about the effort we've gone through for stormwater management, and the stormwater management effectively remains the same. One basin, as we've now created space between the 2 buildings, actually gets slightly larger. We have more space for it there. But essentially, the stormwater management stays the same. The fact of how circulation operates in each side, while we've separated them, and we'll have a traffic engineer talk about it, but in my opinion, still good and safe circulation. We have the 2 emergency access points. We talked about that previously. Mr. Papen talked in his opening statement about our separation to Fort Plains Road. That remains unchanged. Other than the emergency access, there's no connection. And if you recall, we looked at a couple of different aspects of this, and what you can see in this rendering, called on the right half, those are mature existing trees that we've proposed to preserve. And then where there were some lower, newer trees starting to grow in, we were going to construct to the left side, a berm, and then landscape that berm. We worked with Ms. Sherry Spiro on some concepts for that. Footprint of development. So, we talked before, it's a 34-acre parcel. Approximately what we're looking at here is 14 of those 34 acres. And that footprint within which we're working has not changed. And then,
I have a couple things. You let me know when you're ready for me.
sure, I was just going to go to some of the actual specific numbers on the parking, because that sort of changed
I
around.
think that would be appropriate.
So to run through some numbers on the parking, on the flex space side, we have parking proximate to office space in the flex building below those buildings. That's 82 car spaces. That remains the same. I talked about the addition of, call them sort of fleet spaces for pickup trucks. There's 25 of those added to the plan and 14 oversized spaces. Those are 12 feet wide and deeper to accommodate, say, a landscape truck. And then the 15 were the number of spaces we eliminated, which I had referenced a little bit earlier. On the flex space side, there's a requirement of around 75 spaces. We certainly exceed that, not even including the what I'll call fleet spaces. The 82 office spaces meets that requirement. On the self-storage side, there always were and remain 5, we call them dedicated loading spaces. These are car spaces. 3 were under the building and 1 was at the end. Those remain for people to pull in and unload from their car. There's 15 vehicle spaces right along Route 9. Those remain the same. And then throughout the loop, there are 18 added vehicle spaces. And this gets us exactly to the required number of 33, so that complies as it stands on its own. Goes through the parking numbers. I don't know if there was anything else you wanted to.
There are a couple of points I think that we should revisit. Along the way in August and September, there were some questions from the board and staff about sanitary sewer service and also about potable water and water pressure. And we previously provided to the board that there is a private sewer line that runs through the property. It is privately owned. We have been in contact with them. You had reviewed the size of the line and had advised the board that you found that the size of the line was more than adequate to handle the anticipated flows. If you could just restate that for the board.
So for our site, there's more than adequate capacity for what we're proposing. Then we had also looked at, through an easement on the property, there's an 8-inch sewer line out to Route 9 that has capacity. We had done a little bit of an estimate on that 8-inch line. We know what's connected to it. We're sort of guessing at what might connect to it in the future. But as a framework, over 420 single-family homes could be connected to that line. So there is significant capacity available if people in the future along Route 9, other properties, wish to connect to that line.
There was also some concern about the water supply that's available and whether the pressure in that line would be adequate for the purposes that we're asking this board to consider. And the board will be reminded that the buildings are suppressed with a fire suppression system. So if you could let the board know what you did in that regard with New Jersey American Water Company.
Sure, and I guess I'd even start to remind the board, and this came up previously, Fort Plains Road was recently repaved, but the applicant had worked with actually both of these utility companies to ensure that stubs were brought to the property line prior to paving. So if something were to move forward, there's no need to cut the new pavement. It's actually a 16-inch water line, which is pretty significant in Fort Plains Road. And New Jersey American was able to provide us actual pressure and flow data. So essentially, you go through a test process where you look at what's the current pressure, and then you run the water out of it, say at a fire hydrant, and when it's operating, it's sort of a high flow to simulate the fire usage. Where does that pressure drop to? And as you might guess, for a 16-inch line, there's a very significant flow and pressure, and we have the numbers from them, and it would support these buildings.
And that was, you initiated that, correct? You reached out to New Jersey American Water and asked that they run that flow test?
We did, yes.
And, okay. So that was a request that was made by the board of the applicant previously. One other aspect, when we were looking at the two flex buildings, there's a separation between the two buildings, and I know that there was a concern that if we left that as pavement, it would possibly get misused. So if you could describe to the board what you have done with the area between the two flex buildings.
So, and even a little bit more in detail, I think we talked previously, we had a separation between those. We had pushed that to 25 feet at the request of the fire chief. But in that previous plan, it was shown as being paved. And I think we committed to this at the prior hearing. It's now shown more like you would see in terms of an island at each end with curb, and it would be a grass or landscaped area.
Supplementing the testimony of Mr. Zugner with regard to parking, at the last meeting, the applicant stated on the record and made a commitment that there would be no outdoor storage at all, and that all of the parking stalls that are on site would be dedicated to specific tenants. And there would be a specific number of parking stalls dedicated to a tenant in its lease, and those would be the only parking stalls that that tenant would be permitted to use. And that would be the way that we would control the use of the parking stalls on the site. Those commitments were made at the last meeting and are restated this evening. I have nothing further of Mr. Zugner other than to ask if he had the opportunity to review the most recent report that came from Mr. Cunliffe, and are you comfortable that you, as you have in the past, can you confirm that you can and you will address the technical requirements of Mr. Cunliffe in the event that we move forward with site plan?
I was able to read the most recent letter, and I'm confident if this were to move forward, we could satisfy all of his concerns.
And if it's not inappropriate, if I could ask if Mr. Cunliffe could comment, if that is adequate, if there's anything specifically that he wishes Lewis to address.
Well, let's do that now. Charlie?
Yeah, so just want to ask some more clarifying questions with some of the representations that were made on the record. So there's 14 oversized fleet vehicles. They're 10 foot by 30, or you said they're 12 foot by 30?
I believe they're 12 foot by 30.
The dimension that I have shown on the plan says 10 foot.
And I would stand corrected.
Okay. And so we're saying that's contractor, like a landscaper, like a pickup truck with a trailer, open or closed trailer, or box truck's going to be parked there? What's really contemplated?
So the way I had envisioned it, and again, was trying to be responsive to boards had raised this concern, which made sense, was to create longer spaces, not with a necessarily specific end user, but imagining just what you've talked about. A landscaper who has a pickup truck with a trailer, they could park the trailer there. Or if someone had a sort of an open, like the landscapers often have smaller sized dump trucks where they can move landscape materials around in the back. Those are a longer vehicle. This would be a perfect space for that.
And then there's, to the north of that, 16 9x19 spaces, and then to the south of that, 9 9x19 spaces. That's what we're saying are for fleet vehicles?
Correct.
So this wouldn't be like if, say, like an AJ Perry or someone wanted to come operate from this site. Those wouldn't accommodate like a large utility van or truck, or what? That's really like a passenger vehicle, 9x19.
There's
right?
a dimension just like a regular car space. So in my sort of consideration for that, I imagine that being like a plumber's use or a carpenter's use, a pickup truck, a van.
Okay. And we discussed, I think, at the last hearing, per the Fire Bureau's request and recommendation, all circulation drive aisles will be striped as fire lanes,
Correct.
right? So
yes.
they'd have the ability, PUD, to come on and enforce if someone's parking in a fire lane. Now, I don't know if you touched on this too. You did make revisions, or the architect did make revisions to the flex building to the number of loading doors, right? So previously, we had a comment in our letter about the applicant exceeding the 1 per 7,500 loading areas per gross floor area. Can you talk about that? What's been changed? Or is the architect going to talk about that?
Well, both. Yeah, I'll let the architect talk about the building in terms of the interior and setup of the building, but there were a few units that had multiple doors previously, and that's been changed. So at each unit, individual unit, there's simply one overhead door for larger vehicles.
Okay. And kind of along the lines of that too, I had some questions regarding the site plan layout for the self-storage building. I think the architectural renderings that have been provided show a fewer number of roll-up doors for that building, whereas the site plan seemed to show more. The architect will provide testimony. I guess is the representation that the architectural plans are what's going to govern
Yes.
as far as entryways to the building?
Yes.
Okay. And then flex space N, so that's on the southeast corner of the building A2. So there's no roll-up door to that, but there's a loading zone on the east side of the 30-foot drive aisle. So scroll up, John. Yeah, to the left. This guy right here. So what's the intended type of vehicle that's going to be utilizing that, and what are the daily activities anticipated for that? Because there's no rolling door or no loading door to the flex space N. So is that envisioned for flex space N, that loading area?
I'm not sure I'm following exactly where you're at. Oh, it's at the end, that space has a door at the end of the building towards the self-storage.
Okay. So then what's that loading zone for then?
The idea was, the thought process was that these units would actually have smaller vehicles that gained access to these overhead doors, right? So you have a contractor, a plumber, someone operating. We wanted a space if they were to get a delivery from a tractor trailer, say, load of pipe for a plumber or something came in, that there was a space, we've created space at each end of the site so that a tractor trailer would have a designated loading space, and then it would be offloaded by a forklift and taken into one of the individual units.
Okay, so there's not going to be any loading activities within fire lanes or anything like that, or parking of tractor trailers within fire lanes? That loading zone is reserved for that purposes?
That's correct, to keep the truck from just stopping in the lane to be unloaded, to give it a designated space.
Charlie, real quick, if I jump in, just trying to keep aesthetics in my head here, what we're talking about. What is the technical front of this building?
I think from the staff reports, the front has been treated as the portion of the building that faces Fort Plains, notwithstanding that it's burned out. But, yeah.
If their property fronts or hits a right-of-way, like Fort Plains or Route 9, those are fronts, regardless of whether they're being treated like a front or not. Technically, they're fronts.
So far from Route 9, I was just trying to
But-
figure out.
Right.
But we run right along Fort Plains Road there. I mean, I know they're not connecting to Fort Plains Road, but that's technically a frontage. And it's a good thing you bring that up because your fence that you're proposing requires relief.
Okay. So the fence was in response to comments of the board members?
I don't take exception to the fence, Ken. I'm just saying that you're in
As
the
per
front
the-
yard, it's 6 foot
Yeah.
high, and it's not 50% open, so you would just need to have Christine touch on that when she gets up to do her testimony.
Got it.
All right, sorry to interrupt you, Charlie. I just wanted to.
No, that's fine, and just to clarify Jen's point, right, so the fence they're proposing, that was as a request of the board, I think, or to address some comments from the public. It complies with the 50-foot buffer requirement, but it's still a technical front yard for Plains there because of the right-of-way dedication. It's a 60-foot front yard setback, so technically in the front yard setback area. What's that?
Can you dimension for us the building now, if you have that right-of-way dedication on Fort Plains? How far, what the setback is? Because if 50 feet looks very close to the building.
Well, the building's 110 feet from the proposed right-of-way line.
Then there's something wrong with the dimensions that are, so right? There's something wrong with the dimensions.
No, they have a 50-foot residential buffer, and then they have the building 110 feet from
you're-
the right-of-way dedication.
Because you're
That's close.
taking a setback from the buffer line,
Right.
correct?
Yeah, that's,
So technically, it's in the front yard, even though you're hundreds of feet back from the road, because the setback is measured from the buffer line.
Agreed.
So you talked also about the self-storage space. You made some modifications to the parking layout. Now you have parallel parking around the 20-foot wide one-way drive aisle. So technically, our ordinance for parking spaces requires a 9-foot minimum. I'm not going to dispute that 8-foot wide is not a common acceptable width, 8.5 for parking ordinances. But would the applicant be able to make that 9-foot wide to eliminate any relief for that?
Are you talking about for the parallel spaces?
Correct.
We could make them, I mean, you can, the answer is yes, we can make them 9 feet
Yeah, we're
wide.
talking about a half a foot on each parking stall,
Right.
so. And then the last comment that I think I have is obviously the stormwater layout. We had provided comments based off what we saw previously. There wasn't any new stormwater management reports submitted with this new layout. Basin F looks like it's certainly larger than in footprint than I think what was previously circulated, so, but we would reserve the right, if this is, ultimately gets the site plan, to review that stormwater report in detail to make sure that everything is still on the up and up, and complies with our stormwater regulations, prior to any future approval, should the board act favorably on the use variance. That's all I have for Mr. Zugner. Actually, sorry, one last point. So you talked about the sewer. They did provide calculations. They provided as-built drawings from Crest Engineering for the sewer line that runs along the northern side of their proposed development, and then I think it heads north, runs back behind CME and Chapter House. So you said there's capacity for 400-plus single-family homes?
That was, right, we came up with numbers which we share with you, but that was my reference point to give a sort of size, not just a number.
Do you have any, obviously, that's HD zoning along Route 9. Did you look at any commercial-type uses and what that would allow for commercial-type uses to tie into that?
It's a private line. It services 3 entities currently. It services the CME building, KFC, and the Chapter House. They are the ones that own the line. A number of people have, over the years, I was involved in that being created some 20 years ago. A number of property owners have tried to get into it. No one has been successful in getting into it because of the topography in the area. So we don't anticipate that there's anybody else that's coming in. But
I mean,
Well,
you can-
Well,
we have,
I mean, in fairness, there are properties that run along that corridor between your frontage on Route 9 and the KFC property that cannot access sewer because they're in New Jersey American Water's franchise area and the infrastructure's on Fort Plains and they don't go all the way back to Fort Plains. And the township, not so much the board, but the township has been advised by several property owners that they cannot redevelop their property because they can't get access to the sewer. So there are those that will tie in.
none of those have asked to tie into the private sewer line to date. Currently, there's just the 3 users. And the line was built and owned privately by the people who the CME.
Am I misunderstanding this? Wasn't there a representation that you were going to facilitate these individuals to tie in? I mean, that was testimony 2 meetings
Yes.
ago.
Yeah, we indicated that there would be no objection to them tying in. No one's asked to tie in.
Well, I don't think they know yet. I mean, obviously, we have to wait to see the disposition of this application, right? On whether or not,
Well, the sewer line's there.
right, but your applicant, or you on behalf of your applicant, put testimony on the record that you would help facilitate accessing that easement that you have are running with respect to the sewer. And quite frankly, it started with, we will help them tie in, and then it was, it's available if they want to tie in, which is a different scenario than that you facilitating the physical tie-in. But now you're like, oh, they're there now. So, this is why this issue came up the second meeting, because I feel like I feel like you're going to use that as kind of some positive criteria to justify the relief, but yet I'm not 100% sure of exactly what is happening with that sewer, and it's important.
I think to go back to where Mr. Cunliffe was, we know the capacity in that pipe. And my example was residential, even though it's not really a residential zone, because that's sort of easy to visualize and also easy to run the scenario. And I could try and come up with scenarios for commercial, but every commercial use sort of has a different flow. So it's sort of like an endless puzzle to figure out how many different sizes of different commercial uses would fit into it. There's significant capacity in the 8-inch pipe for people to connect to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would just be important for the board's reference. I know there was a property owner at one of the prior hearings, I think it was Skillender's, that said, you know, we'd love to tie into some sewer if it was available, and, you know, there was representation about a main being available for people to connect. So when you say it's private, so the applicant has no ownership stake?
The applicant, so when it was done, the easement was acquired over the applicant's property. It was before the applicant owned it, but the way that the sewer group was created, that in exchange for granting the easement across the applicant's property, so that the properties on Route 9 could reach the Fort Plains sewer line, that the property that we're presenting to you is a member and is allowed to tie in to that line. That was part of the private agreement. So the 3 businesses out on the road actually funded putting the line in. The then property owner, a gentleman named Mark Engel, gave the easement to them. In exchange for that, his property was allowed to tie into the private line.
So it's your representation that the applicant has the ability and the rights to tie into the sewer main, but you're saying they are not an owner of the private or have a ownership responsibility or share in the sewer main?
I provided the agreement, and I'll mail the agreement with an explanation to your attorney and to each of you so that you can see the way that it's written. They have the absolute right to tie into the...
No, I think what Jen was getting to is, you know, if we're saying that the sewer is there and other people have the ability to connect into it, is different if this current applicant doesn't actually have any ownership stake in the main, because then it's someone else's main and they're required to, maintain it and they own it, and this applicant doesn't own it. So I think that's just important context for the board's reference on the application.
I'll send the agreement in again, this time with an explanation. I'll break it out.
I can't emphasize enough, though, that I feel like this was not how it was presented to us at a prior meeting. And I feel like it was presented to us that, of course, we can provide access to that sewer. I mean, am I misremembering that?
I agree 100%.
So now it's, we can tie in, but it's private, so no one else can tie in. Like, I really, quite frankly, feel like this is a key issue regarding this application, because that was something that I think the board thought was a positive thing that this application brings to the table, and now it's not quite as clear whether that benefit is actually going to be available through this application, which is how it was represented.
I think that I can clarify it to everybody's satisfaction. I'll do it with the document and in a writing. Mr. Cunliffe, is there anything further?
That's all I have from Mrs. Zugner at this time.
If I might, I would point out that with regard to this stormwater, there has been considerable exchange between Mr. Cunliffe's office and Mr. Zugner's office to make certain, to the extent that you can make certain, that this property can manage this stormwater system that is shown. It's not just that there's a simple sketch. There's been mounding and water table and soil studies, all of generated by Mr. Zugner and delivered to Mr. Cunliffe. And Mr. Cunliffe, if you could confirm that there has been that in-depth review.
I think as talked about that the prior hearing, obviously, we reviewed that documentation. We still have some technical comments that, should this get to site plan, obviously need to be addressed. You know, the comments from a prior iteration of the letter still remain in place. I think the only new comment regarding stormwater management was obviously that the layout changed. Now Basin F is a little bit different in footprint now that the two sites are, or I won't say two sites, but the self-storage and the flex space are kind of separated. You know, we'd obviously want to see if this gets further to site plan, that included in a final stormwater management design, and we reserve the right to make comments on that.
I think that, yes, that's exactly what I would imagine would happen.
Maybe I'm throwing a monkey wrench into this, but in regard to the sewer line, the sewer line as you're proposing it would attach to the self-storage warehouse at the southern part of the property, correct? They would be able to use that sewer line.
All of our buildings would be connected to the sewer.
Okay, so then the approximately 8 properties that are on Route 9 would then be invited to tie into that? What are we going to offer those 8 properties in order to access that sewer line that, I mean, you're obviously going to build something to get to that self-storage building.
Mr. Cantor, I really need to digest the document and send you the digest. The rights of it is a private line. The private line contemplates that people will make contributions and tie into it. Let me present it to you in its entirety with a digest.
So
Thank you.
Just to follow up and kind of clarify, I think Mr. Cantor's question, right? So there's the sewer line that we're talking about. It runs along the north side of the subject development, and then it turns down the KFC driveway, and then it goes north behind the KFC, the chapter house, and CME, right? For the applicant subject site, you're running your own private sewer service on your site that's going to service the flex space and the self-storage. That's on your property. It's not like there's going to be an easement or anything like that too. So,
And we also have access, because it was, as I said, connection was made before the paving. We have access to the line in the easement and to the line in Fort Plains directly. So we have,
Okay.
for our site, we have access to the sewer in a number of locations.
I understand, that makes sense.
so the 8 properties you're talking about, I think that are south of the KFC, between the KFC and, you know, the driveway to the self-storage, there's no, to my knowledge, I don't believe there's any sanitary main that runs along the rear or anything like that to those properties.
Okay.
It goes KFC, makes a left and heads north, and it runs behind KFC, CME, and the chapter house.
So it goes to Fort Plains, not to Route 9.
Correct.
That's correct.
I understand. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Jennifer, do you have anything? I had a couple questions, but
Go ahead.
the buffer that we had talked about at the last meeting was on the HD, even though it's HD zone, I believe there was a couple residentials. Now, Sherry, on this plan, there's existing vegetation. Is that going to be sufficient? Because there was a little question
Yeah.
about that.
So during site plan, we'll have that area just spotted in, but overall, that's significant vegetation. That's why that's left there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we would just add some four-season plants.
Yeah, but overall, it's probably not going to be too much, especially with the fence going in right next to it. So if there's any little gaps, yeah, we'd fill that in.
Now, I'm looking at the southern portion of building, I believe it's building A2. There's some big units there, but I don't the only thing I see as far as parking is on the west side, which is basically what we're considering the front of the building. What exactly is what would you think is going to be using those warehouses? Because they are a little bit bigger than some of the others, but there's no parking in the rear, just loading.
I think that after the architect testifies, you'll find that all of the modules have been reduced in size. We no longer have the large 24,000 square foot tenant. Perhaps
Okay, we'll wait for that
yeah, I
testimony. I can understand that would be a lot better. And then the only thing that I'm looking at too, because it's kind of in my line of work, is the landscaping trailers. 10 feet, trying to pull into a 10-foot spot with a landscape truck and a trailer. That's, even with a little adequate room width that you have there, that's going to be tight. Now, I'm wondering, are you speculating there could be a landscaper there? Because if it is, I'm not happy with the 10-foot width.
We could revisit that and see if these spaces could get to 12 feet.
Yeah, I'm not saying all of them have to be 12 feet, but if you're having a business such as that where you have trailers backing in,
Certainly have the flexibility.
yeah,
at
the
least
10
some of
feet
them
is
would
not, I'm telling you, it's not going to be enough.
be- Okay, that's a good point.
Noted.
Anybody else from the board have any questions? Jennifer?
All good.
Okay. Okay, Mr.
Thank
Pate.
you. Mr. Zugner will remain with us. We're now ready for our architect to join us. Erwin, if you would come up.
And it is my understanding everybody will be here when we open the public where they can ask questions too.
But we'll work with you to make sure.
Okay,
When
thanks.
that date is identified, we'll work with you.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening, everyone.
I remind you that you are under oath. I remind the board that Mr. Kissel's testimony as a professional architect, his credentials are part of the record. I know that you've made revisions to the plans. I'm going to ask if you could let the IT officer know the plans that you intend to rely upon, and then I'll ask if you could take us through a narrative of the revisions that you've made.
Certainly. I will rely on what we're labeling sheet A1 through A4 for the flex building, and A5 through A6 for the self-storage. And in addition to that, we have added 2 renderings.
Ken, you have to speak up, because we can't hear you right here, so I'm
Oh,
very
I'm
confident that the people in the back of the room
I'm
can't hear
sorry.
you.
So I indicated the drawings we're using tonight, and I also stated that we have 2 3-dimensional color renderings that we're introducing tonight.
So sheets A1 through A4 will be used to present the flex building, A5 and A6 for the self-storage building, and the 2 3-dimensional colored renderings,
Right. Correction, please add A7 to the,
A5, A6, and A7.
right.
What are the dates on these plans? Because they're not on the,
These were previously submitted 10/15/24. In the issue block, the last date in the issue block. 10/15/24.
are these the correct plans on the screen?
Let me just look at the date.
Real quick, Andy, do any of these have to be marked?
Yes. Well, I'm just a little confused because I do see
Right?
some exhibits
Yeah.
with markings, but that are color renderings, but I'm not sure if it's the same as the witness is referring to.
So the date on the plans that are on the screen are also 10/15/24.
Yeah, so it's your architectural drawings that were submitted consisting of 8 sheets, last revised 10/15/2024.
Correct.
Yeah, that's,
And what exhibit is that?
Where would you like to begin?
They want to know
It's
what is.
A26 on the list.
Please let me know when you're ready for me to proceed.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, so first I will be referring to sheet A1, and that's the flex building labeled A1. And what we've refined on this drawing is we have 7 units and we have 7 loading doors. So the units are relatively small. I mean, 8,000 square feet to 9,000 square feet. And basically, the configuration hasn't changed, except we've equalized the floors and we've minimized the loading doors to 1 loading door per unit. I will refer to sheet A2. That's the flex building A2. Similarly, this building has been revised to indicate smaller units than what we had before. Basically, they're in the 8,000 square foot range to 9,000 to 11,000 square foot range. So specifically, we have one unit that's 8,224, one unit 8,116, one that's 8,170, then 9,763, 11,500, and then there are 2 units that are oriented in the side direction, and those units are 9,523 and 10,000 respectively. So each unit in this building also has only 1 loading door, and in terms of the square footage per loading dock, they exceed the ratio is exceeding 9,000 square feet. So there was conversation about 7,500 square feet. We have doors that are almost 9,000 square feet per unit. So we have reduced the quantity of loading doors, and they're well over 7,500 square feet per unit. Now,
Mr. Cazzo, before you move off from that, so flex space L and M, M looks like it has its own office and bathroom kind of component, but L does not. Are those going to be used as 1 unit, or is it just a?
no, they're not going to be. They will not be used as 1 unit. It's intended that they're used individually, and
So L just doesn't have a bathroom or any kind of office?
we will add you can't have a unit without a bathroom, so a bathroom and stair will be added to that unit
Okay,
as we move forward.
thank you.
May I ask a quick one before we move from this, too? The top triangle and the one rectangle, it looks like the wall kind of just stops there. Is that 1 unit, or is that just a?
That should go to the exterior
Okay.
wall. I apologize for
Okay.
the drafting type
All right,
error.
just clarify.
I pointed that out to my drafter earlier on. So the subsequent sheets, A3 and A4, depict the mezzanine spaces, the office spaces associated with each unit. They, except for the tenant separation wall movements, the concept and the square footage of those storage units, those flex storage units have not changed. Next is sheet A5. Sure.
So, 2 units side by side are using the same stair?
No.
Because when I'm looking at sheet, hold on, let me get the sheet.
Yeah, I apologize
Sheet
for that.
A3.
Each unit will have its own stair.
So the plans, if the board were to act in the affirmative, would have to be updated to make sure that every unit has, like you just said, a bathroom plus a stair up to the mezzanine.
Correct.
Okay?
Correct. So, sheet A5 are the elevations of the building. The only changes to these elevations are associated with the reconfiguration of the loading doors and any people entrances to the building as required by the movement of the proposed tenant separation walls. So other than that, the units, the elevations have not changed. Now, it has been brought to my attention that the proposed height of the building exceeds what's allowed by ordinance.
Can I just interrupt for 1 second? So I'm not 100% sure that that's true. I think that we have, as you guys know, in our ordinance, we have specific provisions for flex space. However, they're not what they're considered conditional use standards. So non-compliance would not result in a D variance. However, that's kind of the goal that the town has put forward, how they want these buildings size-wise to be. So I don't think that a variance is required because this use at this location is not permitted, so those standards are not applicable to this particular location. But I think where you were going with this is that in those conditions or in those standards, the max height of a flex building is 32 feet, and you're at 37 and a half and 38 and a half, I think, respectfully.
Right.
I would request, if possible, if you could comply with the 32 feet in order to at least maintain the character of what the town envisions for flex, especially given the fact that, the town also basically says that the maximum size of a flex-space building can be 75,000 square feet, which is why they have 2 buildings, right? So, because we're almost there, we're almost at the 150, we're a little shy of 150 total between the 2 buildings. But given that, I would, if possible, that I think would be preferred.
And we would be happy
Okay.
to limit ourselves to 32 feet.
Perfect.
Thank
And then, I'm not sure, are you done with this building? Because I just want to talk about the facade for a minute.
Please, please.
So in our letter of August 16th, we had, the town has specific, I know Ken has been through this ringer with me multiple times about the architecture. There are specific provisions in the ordinance that regulates how these buildings would look, and it applies to all 4 facades. And so a lot of it is, you can't have uninterrupted walls, and I understand that there's scoring and things on this building, but there's also required to be these bump outs if the facades are long. I would just ask Mr. Pape, if the board were to act in the affirmative on the application, would you commit to your team working with my office to come up with something that's a little bit more compliant with the ordinance? You can take a look at them. I'm not suggesting for these types of buildings that we, as you know, Ken, we've been around this rodeo multiple times, 100% compliance with like the recesses and things like that, but come up with some design that is in keeping with the intention of it, if the board acts in the affirmative on the application.
Mr. Chairman, the last time that we were here, Ms. Beam indicated that the architecture needed a lot of work. It could be addressed at a site plan, but I want to make absolutely certain that we knew that the buildings need a lot of work. This gives me a further opportunity. Erwin and I have talked about it. We know that securing first Ms. Beam's approval of the architecture and then this board's approval of the architecture is critical. So the answer is yes.
Okay, thank you.
So that's That's the extent of my testimony on the flex buildings. Now, I would like to move to the self-storage buildings. Those would be sheets A6 and A7. With respect to this building, it's a the changes have been made to the facade of the building rather than the interior layouts of the building. Basically, it hasn't changed. It's a total of 4 stories and 153,960 feet. There's no change there. But what we did in the elevation designs of the building is we made an effort to give the impression that the building is lower than it is by adding a mansard to the top story of the building and then incorporating dormers around the perimeter of the building. In addition to that, we've scaled the area below the mansard, kind of overscaled it, so it reads as a 3-story building rather than a 4-story building. At least that was our goal in the intent of the design. Adding a mansard, adding dormers, and just scaling the building in a way that it reads 3 stories. Other than that, there are no changes to the plans, but these are significant, changes based on what we heard at our last meeting.
Which sheet would you want to have up for the board to see the modifications to the elevations?
Sheet A7. And in addition, another sheet the other drawing that would reflect the changes would be the renderings that we've added today. And there are 2 renderings, but the sheet that we added today, which is A9, is a 3D rendering of the self-storage building, depicts in color the proposed dormers and the mansard that extends most of the way around the building on 4 sides.
Did you deliver this electronically to Ms.
Yes,
Sousa?
yes.
Could we bring up sheet A9, the colored rendering?
That's A8, if you can go to A9, please. Okay. That is the sheet I was referring to. So there's kind of 3 different, horizontal color variations around the building. We have the dark gray and the lighter gray on the first floor. We have the light color material in the middle, and then we have the mansard with the dormers on top. So we use these horizontal color techniques and architectural elements to give the feeling that the building is a 3-story rather than 4-story structure.
The intention of putting up, I just had to look up what mansard is. But looking up and seeing what the mansard and the dormers are.
Mr. Cantor, the only reason that we're giggling is because she literally just asked me the same question.
Well, so your intention is to make us think that that's only 3 stories when it's actually 4 stories?
We're not trying to fool anyone. We're just trying to give the appearance of a lower building than a higher building.
Maybe I shouldn't opine on this, but it's not my opinion that it looks 3 stories.
Yeah. And I grew up in a mansard colonial, so I'm very familiar with it.
So a mansard is a sloped portion of the building with a roof on it, with roof shingles. Sorry. We could take the criticism.
The building's height is 45 feet. That's correct, Erwin?
Yes.
And the height of the building is not a variance. It's the concern that has been brought to our attention previously. It's not that the building's too high, but that there's 4 stories in it. Not that that's a violation of anything.
And our position would be that if it's a straight wall, it tends to look taller than a wall that looks like this. That's all. I mean, we're not trying to pull the wool over anyone's eyes. There are some buildings that have used that along the Route 9 corridor. We're attempting to do the same thing. And that, I didn't mention the A8 rendering, but that's a new 3D rendering of what the project looks like now, with Route 9 going diagonally across the sheet, north being on the left, south being on the right,
Mr. Chair, could I just ask a clarifying
or vice
question
versa.
about the mansard roof? So are you actually losing any footprint of the units on the fourth story, or is the exterior wall essentially still staying the same? Because you have a floor plan for floors 2 through 4, and it shows them all as the same
Well,
footprint.
I would say it's a small difference. So
So you have
the unit-
eaves, you're making it up with the eave overhang?
Well, to a certain extent, yes. So we're not suggesting that it's less. There may be some evidence of the dormers on the interior of the building, but I would say the difference in square footage is nominal. It's a small difference.
Gotcha. So the mansard, it's a pretty steep pitch, and, they're not really losing much of the 4-story floor area. It's just they're going out with an eave, and then they're coming up sharply. So it gives the appearance of a roof, but, largely the 4 stories, the same gross floor area as the second and the third.
Correct,
All right,
yes.
just wanted to clarify that.
Anything else from the professionals with this witness? Any questions from the board? Okay, Eileen, we're going to take a 5-minute break.
The board will now take a 5-minute break and reconvene at 8:25 p.m. The meeting will now reconvene.
Here. Yeah, we thought you left, but I just checked the time clock, and we were like, yeah.
Very sorry.
Okay, Mr. Pate, where are we now? Your traffic?
We're about to go to our traffic engineer, who has already testified, who's already been placed under oath, and whose credentials are part of the record.
Okay.
Take a moment to reintroduce yourself and confirm that you are under oath.
Yes, Nicholas Verderisi, Dynamic Traffic.
And you're under oath.
Yes.
So there's been revisions to the plans. The plan revisions have been presented by both the engineer and the architect. And those revisions to the plans affect the on-site circulation. And what I would ask that you do this evening is identify the on-site circulation for the 2 separate uses and share your professional opinion as to the safety and adequacy of that circulation. Could we perhaps have Louis-
A29.
A29.
Nick, you guys are going to have to talk up.
Yeah,
We cannot hear you at all.
Big voice.
I will scream it out.
Don't be shy.
Thank you.
A29, please.
A29, please.
Thank you. So my office prepared a supplement to the traffic assessment to address the current plan as was testified, stated 10/9/24, submitted to the board. In there, we discussed a few things. One is, during my testimony last time, there were a number of discussions on the interaction of the 2 uses, one being more industrial in nature, one being kind of a light commercial, lighter use, and the differences between the types of traffic that come in and out, and the interaction of that. So what we were able to do in this new plan was to separate those 2 uses. So essentially, you have the very low traffic generator standing on its own with its own access to Route 9. That's the self-storage facility, Building B. And the higher of the two uses, still a light traffic generating use, is the flex space. Other things that change, you heard about the parking spaces. Of importance to get this to be more like what I would normally see for a flex building. There, as the board suggested and the new plan proposes, smaller flex units, less loading, really circulation more geared to single unit box trucks, vans, pickup trucks, and that's what this new plan is really showing. So this is really your true flex, I think what your ordinance discusses in a flex building with some warehouse space, a small percentage of office space, and only roll-up doors. That's important. The previous plan had a number of essentially tractor-trailer doors that tractor-trailers could back into. Those have all been eliminated here. And as you see, and it was testified by our engineer, there's just the one space in case a tractor-trailer does come on the site. It's off to the side of the buildings, and as he noted, they would either dolly or forklift anything from that into the building. Based on the sizes of these, I don't anticipate much activity in that loading zone, but we wanted to have something off of the road so they're not, as we heard before, not parked in the fire lane, so not blocking any vehicles that are circulating the site. 30-foot aisles all the way around. Some places it widens out, so that's adequate for that largest vehicle as well as the fire apparatus. As you heard, there's two separate fire connections, emergency services only. One is between the two buildings, and one is off of Fort Plains Road. As far as parking, the new plan on both sites essentially has slightly increased the number of parking stalls. So Building B can stand on its own and it meets the ordinance. I think 33 spaces is probably more than it needs, but that's what the ordinance requirement is. And there's also the ability on the inside, so along the building, there's a 10-foot wide loading zone. That would likely be where the overhead door tenants would, park a pickup truck or a SUV or whatever they're either taking or dropping off at the site. As far as the use, I testified to this last meeting. I just wanted to get it on the record again. This is a HD1 zone, so there are a lot of different commercial uses. Just to our south is the Home Depot Center. On the Home Depot Center is one small pad for Dunkin' Donuts. A Dunkin' Donuts, essentially of that size there, generates as much or more traffic than this whole entire 300,000-ish square feet. So that 2,000 square foot Dunkin' Donuts generates more traffic than this whole entire project. At a maximum, we generate 96 peak hour trips. The DOT considers 100 trips to be significant, so we don't even rise to that level, and we're developing 14 acres of property here versus that little half-acre Dunkin' Donuts as our neighbor. So this use, replacing an HD use, there aren't many HD uses that generate less traffic than these proposed uses. So lastly, the size of those parking stalls, I tend to agree on the larger 10 by 30s that we have. We could probably go to, say, 12 by 30s and reduce by maybe 2 parking stalls. I don't think it's a problem. We just had the room for it. It would work nice. We could end up with 10 or 11 spaces in that location, so I don't have an issue there. A lot of it will be tenant driven, and we might not even know at now, especially we're really early. We're only looking for the use portion when we get further to site plan, if we have any specific tenants when we get to that point. And that's all I have.
And are you comfortable that the design that the board is reviewing can safely and adequately handle all of the anticipated all of the anticipated traffic movements, the trash removal, the emergency vehicle, the smaller truck and the articulated tractor trailer?
Yes, I am.
And are you comfortable that the driveways that are being proposed connecting to Route 9 similarly can adequately and safely handle all of the traffic movements that would be associated with these uses?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, I have nothing further. Mr. Federici.
What, again, you were kind of vague with the largest vehicles or tractor trailers. I mean, you're not saying they're not going to be in the equation at some time? Because we need to have something more specific on tractor trailers, because I think all of us here are more concerned about that than...
Sure. There's a chance. It's been designed to accommodate the wheelbase 62, maybe even a 67 wheelbase tractor trailer to circulate the site, so we're comfortable.
Okay, and one of the board members from our previous meeting had mentioned the issue if they miss the main entrance to the, they go down, are they going to be able to, if they made the mistake of going into the self-storage, are they going to be able to get around? Or do we need to put signs out there to keep them out of there? Because,
So they would just make U-turns on Route 9.
okay, but I mean, how are they going to know that without having some kind of signage?
Oh, I would assume, I guess it's some kind of variance to get a sign, but we're going to need some type of sign at the end of the easement.
Mr. Chair, are you suggesting a sign that says no tractor trailers or no connection?
Well, I'm going to leave that up, Charlie.
No, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think the question from the chairman is, how do people know to get to this site and where the destination is? And I think you put testimony on the record that there would be a monument sign proposed within the KFC easement at the Route 9 frontage indicating that this is the site and, so people, tractor trailers know or whatever, box trucks and the like know that this is the site and how to get to the flex space, right? Because before it was, the sites were, the two locations were combined and you could miss the first and then go to the self-storage and then come back. But there is going to be some monument sign through the access easement and on the Route 9 frontage to indicate where the site is, right?
Each driveway has a monument sign proposed. If adding to one sign will be for flex and one for self-storage, if adding to the self-storage sign, no access to flex building or something along those lines was appropriate or to address the board's concern, we can do that. But I think you also wanted to know if a tractor trailer went into that site, can they circulate around the building and then leave? Is that the...
Yeah, well, that's an important question, because sometimes the truck drivers aren't going to be paying attention to the signs.
These are two separate and distinct properties, so I don't see why a tractor trailer would turn into a self-storage facility to
Well,
get.
because
He's not gonna-
they're going to miss it.
Yeah,
It's that
they're gonna-
simple.
they're
They're
gonna
going to
miss
miss
it.
it.
Yeah, they just miss and they make a U-turn like they would at any other mid-block property on Route 9.
But if they did go into this, now that they can't go through, can they get around this building safely? If they did,
Can they circulate around the self-storage building? Can a tractor trailer circulate around the self-storage building? Does the
I don't
turning
know.
template show
I
that?
haven't seen a plan that showed a tractor trailers.
Okay, so I
can't
think
say.
that's your concern, right?
Yes.
Because you're worried that, I understand there's going to be a sign at the KFC that says whatever industrial building, whatever. But if somebody doesn't know, now keep in mind, most often flex space users, they're going there to work, so they know where they're going. I get, like, we're going to have deliveries, but by and large, when you're dealing with like a contractor, they're not having the deliveries made to the flex space, they're having the deliveries made directly to the job site. But it is a good point, you are gonna have people miss the turn. I don't agree that somebody who misses that driveway is gonna navigate the U-turns on Route 9. They're gonna make a right on West Farms, they're gonna make a right on Fort Plains, they're gonna make a right down on Burgerville, and they're gonna come out and they're gonna head south on Route 9 again. That is by far the faster way to do it. Especially at certain hours of the day when that light is a lot.
agree.
Mr. Chair, if I could just
Yeah.
ask a couple more clarifying questions. So I think, Mr. Verderese, you said that the standalone loading area, that's for tractor trailers, and then, so there's a concrete apron for all the loading doors facing the east side of the building that's 50-foot wide. So that's for SU-40 type box trucks? We're not going to have tractor trailers backing into that area?
No, there's no need because there's no loading docks anymore. So when there were loading docks, it was a different animal then. We've eliminated that at this point. Yeah.
Would the applicant agree to a condition of that no tractor trailer loading, backing into the concrete apron in front of all those flex spaces?
Yes.
Okay. And then the second question I have following up that too. Obviously, the loading door itself is pretty, say 12-foot wide, and then you have, another, I'm just approximating, like say 30 feet of the building facade where there's an apron in front of that. Are we going to be expecting box trucks to be parked there overnight? What's the anticipated use of that apron other than in front of the roll-up door for loading purposes?
I'm assuming it's to get to the roll-up doors. That's, I think, why we put some oversized, so they weren't all just sitting in front of the building.
Okay, so would the applicant agree to no parking of box trucks within the concrete apron loading area? No overnight parking?
I thought that the last time we talked about that would be a good idea
Oh,
to
did we?
put concrete aprons in front of the building so
Yeah.
that if there was an overnight vehicle.
Yeah, I don't recall that. I guess, whatever's being proposed, I just want to make it clear for the board what that's being utilized for. So you're saying there can be parking of SU-40 box trucks, so they're not parked throughout the site?
We anticipated that the area in front of the loading dock, which now has a concrete apron, would be an area that the tenant would be permitted to park his vehicle, including a box truck, overnight.
Okay. All right, and then, you can go, Jen, if you have something.
I'm sorry, I thought that there was a conversation that like these types of vehicles were going to be stored inside the building.
Exactly, yep, I was just
Yeah.
gonna,
Right?
you just took the words out of my mouth.
So
Yep.
I don't remember the parking on the concrete. I think we talked about, especially if, right, it was inside the building, and especially if there's material in those trucks that has been determined to be considered outdoor storage. So there was testimony about that at a prior hearing.
Yes.
There was a request for concrete aprons to be installed so that vehicles could be parked in front. But if it's the direction of the board that there's no overnight parking on the apron, then that's an acceptable condition.
How do we feel about that?
It doesn't bother me that trucks would park in front of their own
I think the concern was if you get like an AJ Perry or you get a landscaping contractor that has a lot of equipment, most often they're just haphazardly put all over the place, which makes circulation through these parking areas cumbersome. And we also don't allow outdoor storage. So I think it's coupled between the two.
And also theft, potentially.
You guys, Well, we're going to have to address that because, I understand.
If I'm a lessee renting a space and there's space in front of my
Unit.
location, I would want to be able to park my truck there.
Can we put stipulations on if it is outside that they have to be compliant to what we put down as in the resolution?
And we do intend to control all those parking spaces through the lease. Every space would be identified in the lease and dedicated to a specific tenant.
We have truck spaces.
We could do something where we can't just drop
Seems
a
to me if
trailer
you're
and leave it there
Loading
for
that truck in the
a month,
morning, you'd
you
be
know what I
right
mean?
there instead of having to go get it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of leaning that way too, but I would like to make sure we have everything very much, black and white as far as, how we're going to deal with the regulating that.
I think there's also a difference between trucks and equipment, like outdoor storage.
No equipment.
No
No
equipment.
equipment.
No equipment.
No
Yeah,
equipment.
right, absolutely.
No materials, no equipment.
Right.
That was stated.
Keep in mind, if there's materials in the truck, that counts as outdoor storage. We went down that was actually litigated. So, that was in a planning board application, that exact issue was litigated and was determined to be outdoor storage.
As we put the black and white together, I'll make sure that one of the lines is that any truck that's outside has to be empty and can't have material in it.
How do we enforce that?
Yeah, well, that's,
I mean, it's
That's-
all well and good to put it on paper, but we're not sending people to open up private vehicles to see whether there's material in it. Like, it's an unenforceable condition.
Wouldn't like outdoor storage kind of be someone parked a truck and just left it there versus we have stuff in it for overnight to go, okay? Okay.
In that particular instance, it was tractor trailers, and the trailers were being proposed to be left in the parking lot fully stocked. That was determined to be outdoor storage.
Oh, yeah,
So
I agree
that
with
was, I think, part of the reason why we talked about the vehicles moving into the building, so that there wouldn't be outdoor storage, because that was also something that was initially stipulated tonight, no outdoor storage.
yeah, taking a second look at this, I mean, with trying to enforce that, I can see being an issue. So I can see that's a valid point, so.
I mean, I don't think it's something we have to get to the bottom of today, because we're clearly not going to vote tonight, but it's definitely something that warrants consideration.
Yes.
Got it.
So,
Okay.
Mr. Chair, the last thing is, I believe there was testimony and discussion the last time Mr. Verderisi was here about the applicant being amenable to making a contribution towards a future traffic signal at West Farms and Fort Plains Road. You know, I think for the board's consideration, we didn't know what exactly that contribution is, because that goes towards positive and negative criteria. So that'll need to be presented to the board so we know, you know, what we're considering as part of the application before we get to a vote, so.
Mr. Pate?
Yes, I thought the applicant did agree to make a contribution for that signal. I thought that we had said that it would be, we would look for a participation ratio from the municipality. If you want, we can sit down.
Yeah, I think we want to know what that amount is, you know, and
Would I do that with you, or would I do it with Mr. Yost? Where would I go to discuss that?
I would start with Justin, because I do know that they have been working on a signal design and probably would know roughly the cost from which you can calculate your pro rata percentage.
Got it.
Okay, any further?
I just have one other
Yeah, okay, go
question.
ahead.
And I'm not sure, Nick, if this is for you, and I probably should have discussed it with the architect, but Ken, you could probably stipulate to that. One of the other provisions that we have regarding flex space is that no more than 60% of an individual building can be occupied by one tenant. Is that something you would be willing to stipulate to?
Yes,
All right, thank you.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's no more questions for this witness.
I have no further direct.
Okay. Okay, so I guess we're to Christine.
We are ready. There are a couple of factual issues that remain open where I owe commitments to the board and the board's professionals. I think that they're sufficiently identified that Ms. Cofone can testify this evening. There is the possibility after we provide, and I have 4 that I wrote down, after we provide those additional facts to you, that there might be supplemental testimony.
No, I agree, yeah, that's
But I
understood.
think since the opportunity is here this evening, and we're all here, that Ms. Cafone's testimony is, we're ready for it.
Okay,
I wasn't here the first evening, so I'm sure I wasn't
Christine.
sworn.
Do you swear the testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Please state your name for the record, spell your last.
It's Christine Nazaro, Nazzaro, Cofone, Cofone. Business address is 52 Reckless Place, Red Bank, New Jersey, 07701. I'm testifying this evening as a licensed professional planner. I have testified here in Howell on many occasions, as well as hundreds of other planning and zoning boards throughout the state. My licenses are current and
okay,
valid.
that's,
That's enough, you've run enough. Okay,
So
you're good, Christine.
thank you.
The last is, Mr. Chair, does the board accept Ms. Cofone as a professional planner and allow her to testify as an expert this evening?
Yes, we do.
Thank you. Ms. Gaffone, I know that you have been actively involved in this application, that you're familiar with the facts as they've been presented to the board, and that you've made yourself familiar with the application and applicable ordinances and master plan here in town. Could you give the board a brief description of what you do to be prepared to testify, and then take us in a narrative through the proofs that we owe this board, and if you would then present the proofs that we have generated for this board?
Sure. So, good evening, Chairman and members of the board. For the record, again, Christine Caffone. What I did with this application is no different than what we do on all the other applications. We review all the filed plans that we and other team members submit. Then we participate in the multiplicity of Zooms and conference calls that our team has. I visit the subject property. I review the professional review letters that your board professionals prepare to identify the variances or issues with the application. Again, visit the site a couple of times and then, come to the board prepared to testify. So the reason we're here before the Zoning Board of Adjustment, while the subject property sits entirely within the HD1 zone, which I would consider to be a fairly permissive zone, there are some 20, commercial permitted uses that range from offices, financial institutions, healthcare facilities and medical centers, hospitals, restaurants without drive-through or takeout, restaurants with drive-through or takeout, entertainment uses, retail sales, retail services, home improvement centers, tattoo and body piercings, adult daycare, health clubs and fitness centers, indoor recreation, microbreweries, schools, commercial schools, craft distilleries, assisted living facilities, and self-storage facilities, all permitted. Now, when this application was filed, self-storage facilities were not permitted in the HD1 zone. That came in of March of 23. They were allowed to be permitted uses. The reason we're here before the Zoning Board of Adjustment is because the flex space is not a permitted use in the HD1 zone. You heard some dialogue before about the height of those flex spaces, and because we're not permitted in the zone, we're not governed by them, but with reduction of the height to 32 feet, we do meet all of the bulk criteria if we were in a zone where flex were allowed. So I think the board can certainly take notice of that. The other reason we're seeking a D1 variance is because we have multiple permitted uses on the property. So the D1 is related to the non-permitted flex space and the multiple uses, and perhaps to the extent that the self-storage was not permitted when the application was deemed complete. We are, I would point out to the board, eliminating a non-conforming use in the zone. There are a number of residential cottages on the property currently, which are in the process of being phased out. As I just read to you, and what I was just listing off was just not a recitation of uses that I was dreaming up or thinking. Those uses that I just read from come right out of your zoning ordinance at section 188-77, and they're listed through. So nowhere in that list that I read were identified in the code as residential uses. So as such, we have an obligation to demonstrate to you that the site is particularly suitable. Now, it doesn't have to be uniquely suitable. We don't have to demonstrate that this is the only use that can go here, and we certainly don't have to demonstrate that we've ruled out every other site. There just has to be something about this property that is particularly suitable for this use. So I think when you look at the size and shape of this property, it is a long, skinny, environmentally constrained property. And when I say it's long and skinny, to put some color on those dimensions, right, our property, the developed portion of it is about 500 feet in width. It goes back, the linear property is about 1,600 linear feet, and then we've got about 200 and maybe 85 feet of frontage on Route 9. So to go over those dimensions again, we have about 285 feet of frontage on Route 9, which is, if we want to zoom that out, maybe be easier to see that. But then you'll see, the property has a depth of over 1,600 feet, 1,600 linear feet in the developed area, and then a width of 500. So as you can see, the geometry or the shape of the property, certainly, there we go, that's the whole site. So again, going to the bottom of the plan, you see we've got the frontage on Route 9, and then when I say the 16 feet in the developed portion, I'm referring to the linear portion of the property where the development is occurring, and then at our widest part, we're about 500 feet. So those dimensions, in my opinion, set up beautifully for a program of uses that do not front, thrive on, or require any type of pass-by traffic or visibility to be successful. When you look at the stated purpose of the HD zone, it is in section 18877, again, the purpose of the HD1 zone is to provide for highway-oriented development in the Route 9 corridor on larger lots than permitted in the HD zone. So while that may be the stated purpose of the zone that this property is in, I'm not sure how much of a workhorse this property can be to contribute to the purpose of that zone, given the geometry of the property. So I do think that, as far as the reconciliation, the omission of these uses, I think that this is a unique piece of property that is very, very suitable for the development, and particularly suitable for the development program that's being proposed. And in one of our prep calls, one of the things that the team discusses where you separate the mice and the elephants. So, we separated the two uses. I think you heard testimony about how that will function, and I think the site is certainly large enough to allow for the separation of those uses. And when you look at impervious coverage and the critical mass of intensity that's going on a site, in the HD1 zone, you are allowed to have 70% impervious coverage. This site is under 25%. So that gives you some perspective as to the percentage of this site that we're actually developing. Pretty tiny. So that's the positive or the particular suitability, as well as the Medici reconciliation for the HD1 zone. So we still have an obligation to demonstrate to you that the positive criteria are satisfied. And the positive criteria are really the purposes of the municipal land use law. They are at section 40:55D-2 of the municipal land use law, and they are not unique to Howell. They are purposes that are identified by letter and not number. Statutorily, if we advance one of them, we can be found to meet our burden of proof for this positive criteria. I think the board can rely on 3. Criteria G talks about sufficient space in appropriate locations for a variety of uses. I think that given the size and configuration of this property, there is sufficient space for the applicant. While we're not at the site plan phase, we have given you, I believe, ample information to come to the conclusion that there's sufficient space to accommodate the development program that's proposed by the applicant. Criteria H talks about the free flow of traffic. It's very important when we work as a team that we all have a synergistic relationship with each other. And I think when you listen to the testimony of Mr. Verderisi, specifically his testimony that the Dunkin' Donuts alone that is adjacent to this site would generate more traffic than the entirety of the development program on this site. Self-storage is a notoriously low traffic generator, and flex space is certainly going to have a lot less of a traffic impact than some of these other uses permitted in the zone. So I think that that's compelling when you have, testimony from our traffic engineer that a building that is a fraction of the size is going to have much more traffic associated with it than that's being proposed by the applicant. I think criteria H is appropriate. And then I think criteria M, which talks about an efficient use of the land. When you last re-examined your master plan here in Howell, one of the things that you did was to call for the evaluation of vacant and underutilized properties and for the economic rehabilitation and development of those properties. So I do think that that criteria M, an efficient use of the land, this applicant has done in my opinion, a very solid job of trying to efficiently use this property and to balance the development of the property, right, in an HD1 zone. The township put this in a commercial district. The purpose of our commercial goals are to create commercial ratables to stabilize our tax base. So I think that, we've done a great job of doing that to balance the impacts, right? When you have a development, there are going to be impacts associated with it. And that's what gets us into the prong of our proofs called the negative criteria. And the negative criteria does not ask you to hold the applicant to a standard that there be no detriments, just that the benefits of the grant of the variance outweigh any detriment. And I think the negative criteria has two prongs to it, really, the impact on the public good and the impact on the zone plan. One of the most compelling benefits of this application, in my opinion, is that this applicant, through considerable expense, has facilitated access for all of this commercial traffic out to Route 9. So the only traffic associated with this development that would have access to Fort Plains Road would be emergency vehicles. We are dumping not a single commercial vehicle onto Fort Plains Road. And that's a benefit. That's an absolute benefit because it funnels the traffic to a major state arterial and puts no traffic onto Fort Plains Road. There's also a substantial berm. The applicant has gone through great care to develop a substantial berm to make sure that we have a proper transition to those residences beyond the subject property on Fort Plains Road. So I think when you look at those things, the board can certainly come to the conclusion that there will be no substantial detriment to the public good. As far as the impact on the zone plan, the self-storage is permissible here. In fact, there was an action by the governing body in March of 2023 to allow the self-storage use as of right here. And I think with the modifications made to the application, including having all loading docks oriented, not facing towards the adjoining residential development, having the oversized parking not on the residential side, there are only passenger vehicles or space for passenger vehicles on the Fort Plains side of the project. The very low impervious coverage, the fact that we're such a low traffic generator, I think the board can take notice of all of these things and come to the conclusion that there will be neither a substantial detriment to the zone plan or to the public good. I know that there have been a number of operational things that the applicant has agreed to as far as the number of trucks, the limitations on outdoor storage, and I think the board can certainly incorporate those into any finding if the board were to move favorably on this to ensure that the applicant continues to meet its burden of proof with respect to the negative criteria. And the last thing I'll comment on is that I find that the master plan is advanced. One of the goals in the master plan is to evaluate the potential for economic and rehabilitation plans and to encourage sound land use development that can provide economic development opportunities. So this is an economic development opportunity. Again, this is an HD1 zone. The entirety of this property is located in the HD1 zone. So that is, based on my read of section 18877, that's a fairly permissive and intensive commercial zoning district. So I can come to the conclusion that despite the fact that we need some relief here, I think that the board can grant the relief without any substantial detriment to the public good and the zone plan. So when I review this application in totality, which the Poland case tells us to do, right? It doesn't ask us to pick apart each individual variance and then unpack that one. It asks us to look at it in totality. When I look at this in totality, I find this to be an application that, through the plan modifications made through this process, is a strong application that certainly meets its burden of proof with respect to the positive and negative criteria, as well as the particular suitability and the Medici reconciliation for the D1 variance.
Thank you. I just want to make one point. So the property's in the HD1 zone, and you took a few moments to share with all of us your reading of all the permitted uses that are in 188, was it 18877?
Yes, 18877.
Quite a list of permitted uses, and including the Home Depot could be constructed on this piece of property, and it would be a permitted use. If you, by the applicant agreeing, the frontage that the applicant owns and enjoys on Fort Plains Road comes with no restrictions. Right? There's no restrictions in the ordinance that says thou shalt not access Fort Plains Road for any uses on your property. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So by the applicant voluntarily giving up all of that access, they are voluntarily reducing what could be a very substantial traffic generator onto Fort Plains Road.
Well, it could be and would be. It would absolutely generate a significant amount of traffic. The traffic's got to go somewhere, right? This is a 30-acre site. This is not a small piece of property. This is a very large commercially zoned property. So, it's certainly reasonable and customary that with a large commercially zoned property, there's going to be an associated level of traffic. And again, I think we are putting our traffic not on Fort Plains Road, and the applicant went through a great expense to make that happen.
We've been looking at the plan for some time now, and when we look at the plan, we see that there's a driveway that goes out to Route 9 through the KFC property. That driveway wasn't there. That was through the efforts of the property owner to negotiate and purchase those rights out to Route 9. I wanted to make that point, that there's frontage on Fort Plains that your applicant is giving up, and the applicant took the time, effort, and expense to create an alternative, sending all of this traffic out to Highway 9. I have nothing further. Ms. Cofone, do you have anything further?
I do. The only thing I think I should probably touch on is the fence in the front yard. We have a variance because there is a 6-foot vinyl fence referring, I don't know what we have this marked in the exhibit, but referring to the exhibit that's shown on the screen, there is a 6-foot vinyl fence that is technically in our front yard because while we are not seeking access to Fort Plains Road, we do have frontage on Fort Plains Road. So it certainly is a property frontage, and we are asking for a 6-foot vinyl fence. So that fence would need to be, I believe, be 50% open and perhaps only 4 feet in your front yard. But I think the board could certainly look at that under the C2 criteria. So that's a bulk variance. And I think the C1 is a hardship criteria. C2 is the flexible C. I think you could look at that as a better zoning alternative. It provides a nice, attractive screening feature there. So I think despite the fact that it's a front yard, it's not going to really function like a front yard because we don't have access, commercial access there. So I think the board can certainly grant the C2 relief for the fence in the front yard.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I have nothing further direct of Ms. Cofone.
Okay, Jennifer.
So I'm going to preface this comment by saying I really need to understand what they're doing with the sewer as well as this outdoor storage of vehicles before I can give you my final opinion on the impacts, the positive versus negative. But I do want to give the board a couple of things. As you know, this board is not shy about relooking at their master plan when major things come across us or comes across town hall staff. They're very quick to say, you know what, we really need to relook at our master plan and get things. That's why we have a master plan subcommittee meeting on our schedule. As you know, we did the latest land use element of the master plan in 2022, and a lot of recommendations were made as a result of that initiative, one of which is where self-storage became a permitted use in the zone. Flex space also wasn't defined prior to that recommendation in the master plan, but it is important to know that it took a very long time to get through that process because the town took the time to look at where each use is appropriately allowed and made a definitive determination that the HD1 zone was not appropriate for flex. So while I get the language in there that encourages economic development, which is absolutely correct, I just want the board to be well aware that this is not a forgotten use. It actually was included as a permitted use in the HD4 and some SED zones, so the town, and HD1S, right, Charlie, which is basically Route 9 south of Lanes Mill Road. So there definitely was care taken to look at where these types of industrial uses are most appropriate, and it was determined that this was not it. Obviously, that's why they're here, for a use variance, but it would give me pause to agree that this is like an appropriate use of land at this location. But again, I want to preface this on, the sewer issue is a huge issue, as is this storage issue, which is identified in my mind as, allowing for sewer obviously is a positive thing, but if it's not really going to be allowed, that positive attribute of this is not coming to fruition. Secondly, I would have the same opinion with regard to the zone plan. We took a look at it, and the governing body was actually relatively quick in acting. Sometimes we have those documents out there for years and years, and the governing body takes a while to act. These are things that the town was very concerned about and acted on them, and we actually have seen, not so much here because it's now permitted, but flex space in our industrial areas, like up along 33, Okerson Road, those types of locations, which is where the town felt they were more appropriate. So that being said, I'm not 100% convinced that I agree with the particular suitability argument. I feel like there was some kind of, this project as proposed is a benefit because it generates no traffic, but then we don't access Four Plains Road because we're worried about all this traffic. So is it traffic or is it not traffic? And I don't disagree with Mr. Federici's testimony that Dunkin' Donuts and those types of uses definitely will generate a tremendous more traffic than the self-storage, for sure. The flex, I'm not, I mean, he's the expert, and I've known him for a very long time, and he's never been anything but less than professional, so or you have never been less than professional, sorry. So I don't disagree with what he's saying, but without the benefit of tenants, it's hard to know exactly what the implications of that's
exactly.
gonna be.
Yeah, that's.
But that being said, that's kind of like my 10,000-foot view of this, but again, I would like to, get that additional information before I finalize my opinion, but generally, I'm not 100% in agreement.
No, I agree with you in the aspect, we really do need to have everything said as far as the sewer use, and then I think we need to all think about what Jennifer had just said. So, that being said, Matt, you had a question?
Yeah, I have notes here, and something that I don't think it was reconciled, and if it was, I would like people to catch me up. I know we had talked on the 9th of September about the 4 stories, and do we ever come to a conclusion on that? Because that's also a variance, wouldn't it be?
It's not a variance, so that's
Okay.
the issue. So in the HD1 zone, height is measured just by feet,
Okay.
and the requirement is 45 feet. In residential zones, we see like 2.5 stories, 35 feet, but here, it's just 45 feet, and the architect has testified that the building in its 4-story capacity is at that 45 feet. That's correct, right, Christine? Is at that
Yes,
45
it's
feet
45
height?
feet.
So they are compliant, however, with the straight HD1 zoning. And if they were here just for a self-storage facility, and the box, the cube met all of our requirements, it'd be one thing, but they're also here for adding an additional use to the property, multiple principal uses on the same lot. So, the intensification of the development or, the massing of everything, I think, should be factored into your decision. They don't need relief for it, but it does go towards the impact
Okay.
associated with the development.
All right, thank you for the clarification.
Glenn, Anne Marie, Jose?
Yeah, Jennifer, I agree with you on the, I struggle with the traffic piece of it. I would agree that, because I go there, so I would agree that the Dunkin' Donuts piece, there is traffic. Would I match it up to, I'm not an expert at this, so I guess my question should be, do we have a worst-case scenario? And forgive me, because I did have everything. I had a little bit of an emergency before I got here, so I didn't bring everything with me. But do we have a worst-case scenario case study on traffic for the flex space? Because I just can't wrap my head around the fact that it would be less traffic or less of a traffic impact, considering that, and also pertaining to that road with regard to accidents and the increased activity that is already there with all of the development that's taking place up and down Route 9.
And alongside that, Anne Marie, the type of traffic, cars going into drive-through at Dunkin' Donuts versus...
Yeah, you're not comparing apples to apples.
You're not comparing apples to apples
Yeah,
at all,
yeah.
and that's the part I'm really struggling with.
And the cars don't enter Dunkin' Donuts from Route 9.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
I've asked Mr. Federici to return to, I think that he did a traffic report. He did analyze traffic from the flex, and it's set forth in his report. So is that the question?
Yeah.
Because, yeah, I had all of that information. Like I said, unfortunately, I don't have it with me right now, so I just wanted clarification on that, if you could.
I'm going to, just before Nick testifies, I want to share with you the list that I've made of what we owe you before, and I think some of this is what Jennifer's looking for, but I'll begin by saying I'm going to provide you with a brief addressing Mr. Gazarovski's statement about this board shouldn't be entertaining a bifurcated application. The second is that we're going to respond, we're going to come up with something very crystal clear in black and white about vehicle storage or not, and so that'll be placed before the board with specificity. The next is that I'm going to be delivering the sewer agreement, the sewer easement, and I'll give you a digest of that. The next is our architect is going to update his plans to have the stairs, elevators, and bathrooms shown in all the places that they're supposed to. And the last one that I have here is that I am going to reach out to Mr. Justin Yost, the township engineer, to explore with him what the anticipated cost of the traffic signal is and to come up with a formula for participation by this applicant. So all of that we owe you before we ask that this matter be concluded. With that, Mr. Frederici, could you respond to Ms. Scotson's concern? Did you do a traffic analysis of the flex space as part of your report?
I mean, specifically worst-case scenario. I know there was one done. I just wanted clarification on it in general, but then also with regard to any high traffic, because like I said, Dunkin' Donuts, you can't compare apples to apples. So I'm trying to assume full capacity, larger businesses using the flex space with numerous equipment, deliveries, et cetera.
Yeah, so what we do, because it's a mix of, flex space is essentially a mix of warehouse space and office space. I don't have the specific square footages, but we used all the square footage of office and generated that separate from warehouse. Now, normally if it was a straight warehouse, you assume there's office in there. So we're conservatively adding the office on top of the warehouse. So we utilize the Institute of Transportation Engineers, which we use for, if I was doing it, the HD1 uses, restaurants, any general retail, I'm assuming supermarket type uses, those types of uses that all kind of go in here. And I talked about it before. So even the reason I compared it to the Dunkin', because it is next door and it's really small, right? It occupies about a half an acre. A Dunkin' Donuts generates between 100 and 200 peak hour trips. The whole entire flex space in the peak hour generates less than 100. So if this was developed with, say, something similar to next door, a Home Depot type use, which could likely fit on the bigger side, so the north side, and then maybe a couple restaurants down at the bottom, you're looking at generating probably 500 to 600 peak hour trips if that use was here. I think the reason that use isn't here is because this site doesn't have a lot of highway frontage, so it really isn't suited well, and there was questions as to missing the driveway. That's why there's likely not an HD1 use on this property, because it's been zoned this for a long time, is what I understand. Without visibility to the highway, this property is limited in the types of uses, because those uses are relying on people driving up and down the highway, seeing it and coming in. This is more of your destination where people know they're coming to this site. So when we talked about missing the driveway, if this was HD1 uses, I'd say that was very likely because it doesn't have a lot of visibility. Where the Home Depot, all of their frontage is on roadways, so you can see the uses as you're driving by every single day. And you know Dunkin's there, you know Checkers is there, Home Depot. So this is, when you compare HD1 to this, straight up, this is a much lower, significantly lower traffic generator. It's pretty simple.
So to follow up that, so in the traffic report, you said you did the office and then the warehouse per the IT. Is there any other for this type of use? Does IT have a designation or a land use code for flex?
No.
Do
No,
they have something more akin, like industrial park or something like that?
They have industrial uses. I can look at those and give you the numbers for the next meeting, but they're still not rising to the level of, retail commercial type uses.
Yeah, I think that would be, to Ms. Scotson's point, might be helpful information for their consideration.
Fabrications.
All those. I can tell you just from, doing this for 34, 35 years almost now, it's not that dissimilar. I think the numbers are going to be very similar, but I'll come back with the numbers.
Okay.
Your offer is to go into the the national manual and find the different types of industrial uses, whether it's light industry, assembly, repackaging, and provide those additional numbers for the board.
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah, to Ms. Gotson's point, I think she's just looking for a worst case. And I don't disagree that, we've seen warehouse or other flex type give traffic reports broken up as warehouse and office, right? But there are other land use designations, and I know we don't know who the tenant is and things like that. But, maybe picking the worst case out of a possible type tenant use might give the board some additional context.
Yes.
So we add that to the list of commitments that we have to this board.
John, do you have anything to address regarding the bungalows, just to maybe save a few questions from the public?
Sure, and I thank you for bringing that up, because what you're seeing on the screen is just a small sliver of the property. Everybody seems to have forgotten the bungalows that are just north of here. So as of the letter that I received on December 11th from Larry Leugman, who is an attorney for the applicant, there are still 13 families residing on the property, which puts them in direct violation of an agreement that we had by which everybody should have been vacated by December 1st. So as of today, they are subject to more summonses for those 13 families living there in deplorable conditions, to be quite honest. So, once this meeting's over, I would like to hear either from the applicant or from Mr. Pape to see what the plan is, where they are, just for clarification. But they should have been out already, and I would stress that you should consider that when making the decision. They haven't come into compliance with that, and that should be number one.
Okay. Sherry, I didn't want to forget about you. Anything you wanted to add before we go to public?
No, I'm all right. I don't have anything.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just very briefly, John did tell me that of his concern with regard to the status of the bungalow. There were 34. There are 13 families that have not yet left. There are 21 since August that we have been able to get to leave, that we are working with them. We're trying to be humane, and if they have not voluntarily agreed to vacate, as indicated, Mr. Leugman is the attorney responsible for the eviction. If they are not out in January, he will start the lawsuits. He has tried to do it without lawsuits, but it hasn't. These last 13 are still there.
Okay.
But it's not being ignored. It's just trying to be humane about the termination.
Okay, is everybody good to go to public?
Motion to go to public.
All in favor?
Aye.
Eileen?
The board will now be open to the public. If you'd like to come up, please state your name and your address.
I just want to remind the public that we don't have like a time clock, but just be respectful of the people also that want to speak tonight, so we can try to get everybody in.
Hello, my name is Antonello Bianco. Oh, I'm sorry.
You swear the testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Oh my God, I do.
State your name and spell your last.
Antonello Bianco, B-I-A-N-C-O, 59 Arrowwood Court, Howell, New Jersey, Toscana community. I'm here on behalf of Toscana community, representing our folks in the neighborhood that we oppose to this project. And I and others have walked around the neighborhood and collected signatures that we'd like to present as, for the record, evidence, approximately 175 signatures. Just for reference, we have approximately 186 dwellings in our community, so this represents a good portion of folks who are against this development. We have several reasons why. I can state them, but basically a lot of that went we went over it tonight. Essentially, the zoning issue, we're all against This being built on an HD1 based on the criteria that's been since set forth, traffic. We've heard quite a bit about traffic. We know that there's going to be a lot of traffic and safety-related issues, the whole water flow, retention business. We think that will have an impact, especially during inclement weather. The aesthetic impact, that's perhaps the primary reason that we're against this thing. It's just going to be obtrusive. And frankly, we would like to see, which I haven't seen, an elevation on the Fort Plains side view. You have a lot of wonderful drawings, everything representing Route 9, but what are we going to see?
All of the elevations have been presented. Like, they're in the
Not a
plans.
good, clear one.
I
So
underst-
if we could do something better to give
So,
us...
before you move forward,
Go ahead.
I would just represent the objections of you.
That
Well,
is
Jen, I got
the
it.
objections of me as well as
Well, no,
everyone
that's
else.
what I
Well,
said,
I
as
have
well
a-
as, yeah.
Jen, I got it, hold on a second. So, Mr. Bianco, I have a question,
Go ahead.
which is,
Yes.
are these other homeowners, do you have a homeowners association?
Yes, we do.
And are you attempting to speak on behalf of the homeowners association?
Yes, and
Do you have okay, so that's a corporate entity?
Okay,
So that would need to be represented by an attorney,
understood.
the HOA?
Okay.
Or do you have a position in the HOA?
I do not.
Okay. So,
Mhm.
as Ms. Beam has noted, I think you should keep your comments to your view as opposed to
Okay.
others who
But-
aren't here before the board who then can't be asked questions as well.
Very well.
But you could certainly provide your personal
Yeah,
opinion.
and I have a few personal questions.
I need to add to that. I mean, Mr. Bianco can speak for himself and only for himself. He cannot speak for his neighbors, and he cannot submit a petition that is signed by people who are not here. All evidence that's provided to this board, anyone who is expressing that they're not in support of this application must be here so that we can cross-examine them. So I have no issue at all with the testimony of Mr. Bianco on his own behalf, period.
I concur.
I think we're saying the same thing, Mr.
Very
Payne.
good.
No, I can't present this as,
Well, that can't be submitted
least
as
now,
evidence,
at this
because we
time.
would be,
understood. We'll hold this, I mean,
yeah.
I don't think there'll be a problem for such.
You may, again, if there's a homeowners association,
We'll make sure they represent.
if you're
next time,
represented,
yes.
then that
agree.
association, through your attorney, could then present the view of the association.
But I would like to hear your personal reasons.
Well, some of my other personal reasons, again, just the aesthetic impact, and because of such, that's obviously going to have a property value impact in our view, in my view, excuse me, my view. Noise and pollution, I think it's going to be noisy. I know you said perhaps 100 vehicles per day, whatever it was, but there will be noise. And just the fact that this thing is so close to my home, I know I'm going to hear all of that traffic. And just the community integrity. I think it's just going to negatively impact the look and feel, the quality of life that I've since come to enjoy at Toscana. And be honest with you, lack of notification. I haven't heard about this thing. You say this has been in development 7 years until 2-3 months ago. And really just on a whim. And in my personal view, in asking my community, my neighbors, I'm just guessing here, but I would say 80% has not heard about this. So I don't think proper notification.
I would just leave your comments to what you know.
Yes, okay.
Your personal information.
Yes.
I do have a question, though. I mean, we talked about economics of this thing. It's going to generate revenue, great for the owners. And what kind of jobs would this create?
So like before a land use board, the board doesn't take,
But I mean, that should be considered too, right? I mean, if this thing goes through,
not economics,
No,
it's really
cannot-
land use considerations. That's what's,
Unfortunately, we can't do that.
I'm sorry, I was just looking through my notes to see if anything. Very well. We'll be back. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
do you swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
State your name, spell your last, and your address, please.
My name is Jason Hughes, last name Hughes. Address is 30 Bracken Court, Howell. I heard earlier that there is a limit on the square footage for flex use space. And it's of my opinion that this attempt is to circumvent that by having two buildings separated by only 25 feet. It appears, when you look out, that it would have normally been one building, and that is an attempt to circumvent that one rule. I also typically, with a one-story building, don't picture a 32-foot building as one story. So this does become, in my opinion, a great eyesore for those folks that you can see at the bottom of the photo that are probably approximately 300 feet from that building. So maybe, 3 times the length of this room. While this may generate less traffic than a Dunkin' Donuts, it is a significantly different type of traffic. These are construction vehicles that we will deal with for however long it takes to build it, followed by commercial vehicles, all or many of which will be beeping when you back up into these loading bays and buildings. The berm itself is 8 feet, followed by either a 4-foot or 6-foot fence, so approximately 15, 16 feet. That will not cover, the visibility of the building. Any trees that are going to be planted on the left portion of the photo will take many, many years to mature to even make this somewhat not visible to those residents that are sitting in their backyards, enjoying the time in their pools. And now we'll also additionally have to deal with the increased noise that's going to come from whatever tenants go into these areas, which we don't know at this time. Is there any limit to what can go into these from manufacturing or, sheet metal type businesses, or is there any noise restrictions of the tenants that go into these types of buildings?
The applicant indicated that there'd be no activity outside of the buildings. Then that was part of the applicant's representations.
So I could put a fabrication shop in there that has noise from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. I guess that was the hours that I've heard. Is that correct?
The noise in this building and anywhere in the township of Howell, anywhere in the state, must meet the state noise standard.
Which is what?
Well, there's different decibels at different times of the day. I'm not an expert in it, only that I know that all uses, commercial or industrial uses, must meet the state noise statute, which is also embodied in the township's ordinances.
So I would further submit that there is the potential for not only the noise from the traffic, from the vehicles backing up, but the increased potential noise of what goes on inside these buildings that really cannot be controlled. And I think that's all I have for right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
State your name, spell your last, and your address, please.
Paul Dorado, 27 Firestone Drive, Dorato. I'm actually on the HOA, but I'm not speaking for the development. Just wanted to say that for you.
I didn't hear the address, I'm sorry.
27 Firestone Drive.
Thank you, sir.
I appreciate the testimony that we heard, specifically on the traffic, that you're not going to filter it out to Fort Plains. However, the traffic going out on Route 9, because this is going to be a flex space, I'm going to assume that we're going to have, at some point, 53-foot trucks, possibly, smaller vehicles. But regardless, because you can't go out northbound on 9, you're going to have to make a right out on Route 9. If there's a freight carrier that wants to go north back on 9 rather than going to 195, they're going to have to proceed to the West Farms jug handle, make that turn. You guys said it was a U-turn. It's not actually a U-turn. It's going around the jug handle onto a road that is congested all the time to go back out and to go northbound out on 9. The way freight works, they're going to take the shortest distance, otherwise they're going to charge their more money for delivering it and this sort of thing. So you're not going to have the carriers go out to 195, go out to the turnpike, and then go north. So that area there is going to be really congested. You also have, on that corner, you also have the memory care facilities that's going to go on there. That was approved. I was on the planning board. That was approved over there. So you got a heavy amount of traffic on that thing for West Farm. So obviously, it being Route 9, it's a state thing. There's going to have to be some kind of improvement because you're going to have a traffic nightmare there. You're also going to have traffic that goes out to West Farm, maybe going towards Jackson, at the light that your application for, remember when you did the Sunnyside development, you guys didn't want to put that light there. You got that same thing with the light that they're just talking about the contribution there. So, you know, you actually helped create this traffic mess that is here with some of your other applications, actually. So, but that's a big problem on that route because it's that jug handle in the morning. It's crowded every day. There's people that come in. It's only 2 lanes, 3 lanes. Then you got people coming in. It's going to be an absolute nightmare. So I think at some standpoint, somebody's got to contact the state and figure it out. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Anybody else?
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Yes, I do.
Just
Yes,
swear
I do.
affirm-
My name is Aquanetta Smith. I live at 57 Arrowwood Court. 57
Can you just spell your last name for the record?
Smith,
ma'am?
S-M-I-T-H.
Thank
I have been a resident of
Excuse
Howell.
me, are you making a comment? Because she would have to be sworn in.
I did.
Yeah. Do you swear or affirm the
Yes, I
testimony you
do.
give will be the truth, the whole
Yep.
truth, nothing but the truth?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, thank you. I have been a resident at 57 Arrowwood Court for 22 years. I've raised my kids, beautiful, you know, with the intentions that I would retire there. This is a nightmare. You don't live there, but I do. And, you know, something has to be, you know, not to say that what you're doing can't be done, but it just has to be thought out a lot better than what is being proposed. That's all I have to say. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, good evening, Mark Parisi, 2 Castle Court.
You swear or affirm the testimony I give?
How do you know that I'm not just going to make a comment?
This is our process, Mr. Parisi.
Come on, Mark.
As a former board member, I'm sure you're okay.
Oh, I appreciate that
Do you
recognition.
swear or affirm the testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes. All right, thank you.
And I'm sorry, Mr. Parisi, I didn't get your address, I'm sorry.
2 Castle Court.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mertens, Chairman Mertens. It's a pleasure to say that. I had a couple questions. Obviously, I was here at a planning board meeting when we talked about this area in need of redevelopment. Could someone from the professionals explain what was the reason why this particular piece of property was not included in the area in need of redevelopment, considering that there is some frontage along Route 9 that's like, I think, immediately south of the area in need of redevelopment?
It does start immediately south of that. You know, we discussed the parameters of that redevelopment study that was done, John, when was that done, a couple of years ago? Or a year ago or so? And it was determined at this point that it was going to start with the homes that are on, you know, just south of KFC and run all the way to like the florist to the north on this side of the street. The site was not anticipated to be included at any point. I can't, I don't know exactly the intention behind it. I do know that when the study was undertaken, Mr. Pape had a development application pending before us. This application was pending before us. It's been,
2020, I believe.
I think my file is 2020 or 2021. But it was definitely not included, it was not included in the governing body's resolution to us to undertake the study, nor was it included within the study.
Do you find that that's unusual that you would have an application pending before a land use board for several years, and then they would do a study, about a redevelopment of literally every adjacent property around it and not include it?
No.
For one reason or the other?
I don't, because we didn't include Home Depot either. So it's not like it went all the way, but one lot to the corner. We basically evaluated the study area. It's a large corridor to be studied all at one time, quite honestly. So do I find it unusual? No.
But Home Depot's improved, and there's really nothing to go there. This is largely an unimproved piece of property.
So I'm just going to say, I'm not sure what this got to do with the testimony before the board and the
Right.
application.
I'm
It's
just
more-
re-
These are more policy questions that go to why the governing body has to do a study on a certain area along 9, but I understand that Jen sits in many roles here, but I kind of think I'm just
trying to understand it a little bit better, because to me, it seems unusual. I mean, there certainly can be a rational explanation as to why it was included. I guess what I was trying to get to is that if it had been included in the area of in need of redevelopment, and we're talking about the sewer and how that area in need of redevelopment is going to allow for broader infrastructure improvements to all of the properties that are in the.
So Mark, I'm
included
just
in
going to
that?
interrupt you. That's absolutely not true. We're not providing opportunities for enhanced infrastructure through the redevelopment. We're providing additional zoning alternatives, which is what the redevelopment plan that's underway currently is proposing. The issue with this section of town and why it hasn't redeveloped is because the sewer is on Fort Plains Road. And some of those properties do not extend to Fort Plains Road, so therefore they don't have direct access, which is why we've been talking about the sewer with regard to this project from the beginning. Does this provide opportunities for those buildings that are immediately in front of it on Route 9 to have access? Yes, that's what we want to know, because kind of been dancing around it for 3 meetings. So, the other argument could be this site has access to the sewer, so it doesn't need the help.
Okay. I'm going to pivot to something else. I was looking at the traffic study. We do know that there have been affordable housing projects that have been approved in this particular area, specifically the Zaback project, which is just north of the driveway. Yes, just north. I guess I think it's lots 24, 25, and 26.
It's on the other side of Marcolite, Ken, so it's at the jug handle.
Right. So it's my understanding that there's 360 units that are garden-style apartments. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jen. That were approved. I don't believe that they've begun building on them yet. Right. So, is there, I would expect that since that's located on the southbound side of Route 9, that there will be significant traffic coming from those apartments, because I don't believe that there's going to be any access west onto Fort Plains, so it's going to be all ingress, egress coming onto Route 9 right there, just, I guess, maybe 500 feet north of the driveway, Jen? I mean, is that accurate about?
Maybe a little bit more, because it goes through,
Right.
you have KFC, where their driveway is,
Right.
then you have an office building, then you have Chapter House, then you have Marcolite, and then you get to this property. So
Okay.
it could be more than 500 feet, but not.
But less than 1,000?
I would say probably, right?
Okay. So I don't believe that traffic was included in the traffic study. Now, it's not, I don't know what impact that would have or not, but I think it's important that as this board considers, traffic impacts, that they also consider the anticipated traffic from that Zaback apartment complex that's 360 units, that's going to be just north of the KFC driveway.
Okay, well, you touched on a good question. I mean, Mr. Pate, can we have your traffic engineer actually respond to that?
And that was what I was alluding to. I just didn't want to get into the specifics because it's not built yet.
Is this ready tonight? Sure.
Yeah, yeah, sir. Did you
Head that in?
It's not in there, because we started this job in 2020, and that job was probably approved after that,
Got
right?
it, okay. So
Yeah, so we started this job in 2020, so that one wasn't included. We actually included a couple projects that are actually constructed. Cornerstone, which is down on West Farms, and an office building on Four Plains Road. The levels of service at our driveways are a B. That's north of that jug handle, so likely most of their traffic is going back to the north. So I don't see an issue with if, 50, 75 of their vehicles are passing by our driveway. We have a B level of service, worst case 14 seconds of delay. So I could add that traffic in, it's not going to show anything different than what I've already.
So Mark, can I just interject for 1 second? So I don't know that I agree with your trip distribution assertion. Have you reviewed the traffic report from that application?
No.
Okay, so I don't necessarily, I think you're right, Mark. I think that a lot of the traffic from that proposed development is going to go south and is going to pass both access points on its way south. So I definitely agree that traffic potentially, I don't think all of it's going north. I think a lot of it's going to go to the south.
Either way, even if it all went past our site, we have a B level of service. And all it means is we're less % increase in traffic volumes to the adjacent roadways. I'll get that information and provide it to the board. But I can tell you right now, like I said, 35 years of this, the person speaking here knows me, knows what I do for a living, and I'm very comfortable that traffic that's really a small generator of traffic compared to all the commercial uses up and down the highway.
But you'll do it.
I'll do it,
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah, please.
Thanks, Nick.
You're welcome.
Just a general comment, I understand, what Ms. Cafone is saying about this particular property being unique. I would be curious as to, when there's a statement made about the impervious coverage on, the developable portion of the land, I'd like to know how much of this land is environmentally constrained, because if there's, a significant portion of this land that cannot be developed, I'm curious as to what would be the impervious coverage of the area of land that is developable, not the overall amount of land on the property. If somebody can answer that question for me?
That was the reason why why their development, correct me if I'm wrong, but why their development wasn't extended further north.
Yeah, we covered it.
It's my understanding too.
We went over that, yeah.
There was testimony on that the first time we heard it.
Okay, all right, so then, and I guess my last comment will be that, I think that the board should be cautious about granting any use variances that involve more than one principal use and setting that precedent. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we're about 12 minutes from 10. Anybody else? Do I have a motion to close?
No one, I make a motion to close the public. Everybody good?
Yeah, yeah, we're going to still have, after we get more testimony. Okay, so all,
I have a question. This isn't over, right?
no, that's what I'm saying is we're going to still have more testimony and then the public can come back up at our next meeting.
And you had Mr. Gazarovski
Yes.
as well. Yeah.
So, okay, so all in favor of closing?
John, did you have a question?
I do, for Mr. Pape. I know it's not site plan, but you have a possibility of 14 different flex spaces, which equates to 14 tenants. I'm only seeing 3 enclosures for garbage, one of which is towards the self-storage and only 2 for the flex space, which I would consider insufficient.
Duly noted.
Yeah, so just to add on to John's sentiment, so we obviously had our Rules Committee, and this was a topic that came up, and it's as a result of, after things are built, a couple years down the line, the engineering department is observing these issues with sites with multiple users, with multiple kind of components. I think we just want to see trash refuse enclosures commensurate with the actual scale of the use being proposed and the number of tenants being proposed.
Duly noted?
Duly noted.
Okay. Because I happen to agree with Charlie on that. I'm looking at it too, and 3's not going to cut it. Okay. So, I guess, Eileen, we have to schedule the next meeting for this?
Are we close to the public? I just want to...
Yes, yeah.
For tonight? Okay.
Yeah. That's what I was...
For meeting dates, I have February 10th, I have 2 applications on. February 24th, I have 1 application on, and March 10th, I have 1 application on.
I'll start by asking, what was the first date?
February 10, Ken?
And the next one was February 24th?
24th?
To everyone on our team, are you available 10th and 24th? What are the applications that you have on your agenda at the 10th? They homeowners or are they substantial?
They're both use variances.
They're both use variances.
Yes.
And what is on the 24th?
I believe that's a use variance as well.
And would we be, is it behind that or in front of that?
On the 10th, I have 1 that's already being carried, and the 24th, it's a new application.
Mr. Mertens, would it be possible to go to the 24th and that this is a continued application now?
Yeah, I understand. I just don't know with the objector if that's going to make it a longer meeting. I don't think on your end there's going to be that much more that you have to put on record.
I don't think so, Mr. Mertens, but I expect that Mr. Gazarovski
Yeah, well,
has
that's-
a lot to talk about.
That's why I was just trying to, but I think it is an ongoing application, and I think we should at least, we'll hear it first.
Then, is everyone on our team who's here good on February 24th? The February 24th does work for all of us. If you would be so kind as to announce a continuation to that date, would be most appreciative.
Okay. And do we have to get an extension of time as well?
Yes.
Through March 30th, 2025 on the record, and I'll deliver the letter to Ms. Kusa tomorrow.
Okay, therefore, to put it on record, case number BA 20118, Four Plains Partners LLC, will be carried to February 24th?
Correct.
Okay, with notice to March 30th? Extension of time?
We appreciate the offer to be at the top of the agenda that evening. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Pate.
Thank you, and good night, all.
Is there any further business of the board professionals before?
Needed.
Okay, on behalf of myself, I'd like to extend a Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and Happy New Year to all of you. Thank you for a great year so far, and we'll see you.
To you as well.
Thank you, and we'll see you in 2025. And our next meeting, I'm sorry, the reorg is,
January 13th, 2025.
okay, thank you.
That's reorganization. This is February 24th.
Okay, we're adjourned.
Do we have a motion to close?
Oh, yeah, whoa.
Motion to
Yeah,
close.
I'm getting my feet wet, but thanks for reminding me, Eileen.
I'll second that.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yeah, thanks.